Well, he was acquitted in the trial of the century, but he has been behind bars for the last 8 years. Now, O.J. Simpson about to go before a parole board in Lovelock, Nevada, and ask for his release after taking part in that botched robbery in 2007. Hello, I'm Brad Milkey, ABC News here in New York. We are joined by Deborah Roberts, ABC News correspondent. Deborah, you've been tracking this every step of the way, and so we will have much more from you as this goes on, but thank you for being here today.
Happy to be here, and yeah, tracking it at least the last few months as we've been kind of counting down to this moment with some of Simpson's former golfing buddies, some of them former friends who were with him that night and had a lot to say about what they think about today.
And we will have this entire parole hearing for you live. In the meantime, let's go out to Lovelock, Nevada right now, where we will get the latest from Matt Gutman, who is on the scene tracking this. And Matt, for a man that seems larger than life, that the public has been tracking for the last 25 years or longer, what is the scene like right now in Lovelock?
Well, in terms of the media, there are about 120 credentialed media here. We just saw O.J. Simpson's family go in there, his sister, Shirley Baker, his daughter, Arnell, his lawyer, and the victim has also gone in there as well. So things are starting to gather in that hearing room where O.J. Simpson will sit and try to plead his case. He will be asked a number of questions by this parole board. There are 4 of them. These are the same 4 that paroled him on 5 of the 12 counts he was convicted on back in 2008. So there is a good chance that he will be paroled again. He's got one more ace up his sleeve, Brad, and that is that the victim in that armed robbery heist back at the Palace Hotel in Las Vegas is going to speak on O.J. Simpson's behalf, saying that O.J. Simpson has served his time. It's almost been 9 years. It's time for him to go free.
And Simpson, of course, has been behind bars for 8 years. He could be looking at many, many more if this parole hearing does not go his way. He would be released in October. And Matt, you've been outside the prison for a while. You've been talking to people around there. How has Simpson been spending his days? What is life like for O.J. Simpson right now?
In a word, it's been routine. O.J. Simpson wakes up, he has pretty much the same breakfast of cereal, cold cereal every morning. He then goes to work, he mops up the gym floor, he cleans up the weight machines in there, he works out himself. He paces around the gym a little bit. His knees are a bit shoddy, according to the guards, after all those years of playing football. And for many of the years he was here, he was also very overweight, so that contributed to his diabetes. But now we hear he has lost about 70 pounds. An official I spoke to yesterday who had just seen him said he looks fantastic, in better shape than he's been in a long time. When he goes back to his cell, Brad, he's got a 13-inch TV just like all the others. The one major perk that O.J. Simpson has had during his time here at Lovelock is that he has money, much more than many of the other inmates, and he buys a lot of food from the commissary. And that's one way he's been able to curry favor with the rest of the inmates, by doling out goodies.
He's just like any other inmate, except, of course, Deb, he's O.J. Simpson, and that's the thing we keep hearing throughout this case. You know, there are murders in this country all the time. There are armed robberies all the time. But O.J. Simpson continues to capture the public's imagination.
And not only that, just capture sort of the imagination of these people who were with him that night. I mean, these guys whom we spoke with, many of them were golfing buddies of O.J. Simpson. A lot of them aren't that crazy about him today. They say that, look, their lives were ruined, their lives were changed drastically because of it. But apparently there is still a little bit of a lure there. One gentleman calls him Mr. Simpson when talking about him. Even when he's saying he's disparaging him, he calls him Mr. Simpson. There's this charisma that he has had all his life, and that was one of the things I think that led these men to sort of hang out with O.J. that night and get themselves into this spot that none of them seemed to think that they would be involved in. But what gets me is that no matter what they think about him, they all seem to feel that he's done his time. All of them said to me that they feel that he was overcharged, over-sentenced, that this was probably payback for what happened in Los Angeles. Even
many of them never served time themselves.
That's right. Well, most of them got probation, but one of them actually did serve time. One of the men who was with him did serve time, but they all find it very interesting that 2 of the men who had guns that night did not serve time, and O.J. Simpson did serve time. So they even grudgingly defend him today.
A unique situation. I want to go to our ABC News legal analyst, Royal Oakes. And Royal, you've, of course, been tracking the legal angle in all this. What is O.J. Simpson going to be looking at today, and what are these parole board members going to be looking for from him?
Well, they're going to be looking for contrition, and he knows that. He's going to be making an impassioned speech about how he accepts responsibility. But as you've been saying, the betting is he's going to get parole. They're going to look at his age. They're going to look at the fact he was a model prisoner. They're going to look at the fact that he doesn't have any history of criminal convictions, which is ironic. You think of that Viggo Mortensen movie title, A History of Violence. The guy killed 2 people, plus he beat Nicole repeatedly, those chilling 911 calls where she said, O.J. Simpson is going to kill me, and yet the betting is he's going to be out. And so then the question is, should people be critical of the system of parole that allows him to get out given that history? And then there's the future. Brad, people are wondering, is he going to be doing a reality show? Not to dip too deeply into pop culture, but the Robert Palmer song comes to mind, Addicted to Love. He's addicted to the love of people, addicted to fame, and you can bet he's likely to try to get back on TV, although if he makes any money, he has to pay it to the Goldmans and the Browns. He owes them $52 million. Bottom line, a lot of people are going to be facing a moral choice in a few months, very likely. They're going to see him on Wilshire Boulevard or Park Avenue. Are they going to want a smiling selfie, or are they going to yell at him as a pariah?
And of course, O.J. Simpson, acquitted of those murder charges, held liable in a civil court. And Deb, so maybe this is a good place to go before we hear from O.J. Simpson himself. Can you just take us back to this night in Las Vegas? What happened? What got so out of hand?
Well, what a lot of people don't really remember is that they came to Vegas. Simpson came to Vegas for a wedding. He was best man at his friend Scotto's wedding. And these other guys were just hanging out. Some of them were going to the wedding. Some of them were just hanging out with him. They thought they would just be partying. And when this whole thing came up about hatching a plan, one of OJ's buddies told him that somebody had his memorabilia. They all seemed to think that this was just a matter of just going to talk tough to some guys and get his stuff. Most of the guys had no idea that this was going to turn into something bad until they got into that room, and then the yelling started and so forth. Then, and a couple of them had guns, then they started to realize, wait a second, this isn't exactly what we thought it was going to be. But all of them seemed to say that this thing kind of got out of hand, went wrong. They know O.J. Simpson probably led them down a path, but at the same time, when you talk about this just being a robbery, they all sort of feel like, okay, this was terrible. We've sort of paid our price, and O.J. Simpson has paid his price. But it was one of those crazy things that got out of control, and these guys, a lot of them had to pay for it.
And you've met so many of these players at this point. I mean, what do you think is sort of the vibe around O.J. and his team and his family as he's about to sit down in front of this parole board?
Well, I spoke with Doc Johnson, who is one of Simpson's longtime friends. He's been with him for 20 years, and he's visited him, and he said that the family, O.J.'s counting on this hearing. He's hoping for parole, but he's a realist, and he knows it's not a done deal.
All right. Well, that is ABC's Deborah Roberts. Thank you so much for being with us. Deborah is going to join the network's live coverage, and we will bring that to you in its entirety. So in the meantime, we will just stand by as we get ready for this live coverage of O.J. Simpson going before this parole board. You see the empty chairs right there, and he won't be in the same room with them. He will be speaking to them in a video teleconference. 4 parole board members there. There's another 2 on standby in Las Vegas. If Simpson can convince those 4 that he should be paroled, that's all you need. Otherwise, they might need to go to those other parole board members for their opinion. I want to go now to ABC senior national correspondent Jim Avila. And Jim, you have been following this saga of O.J. Simpson since the beginning. What is it like now to see O.J. Simpson behind bars in handcuffs, yet for a completely different crime than for the alleged murder of 2 people?
Well, that certainly is a long story. It began back in the mid-'90s. I was a local reporter here in Los Angeles at KNBC, and I remember in the June morning that I got a phone call, told me to go directly to Rockingham because O.J. Simpson was suddenly a suspect in the murder of his ex-wife. And from there until now, I've been covering O.J. Simpson from the trial and every day in court here in Los Angeles, in the trial where he was acquitted, then again in Las Vegas when he was arrested for this armed robbery. I covered that trial and watched him age, and we understand it's going to be interesting to see what he looks like today. Haven't really seen him in several years. Supposedly he's lost a lot of weight. We'll see if he continues to be contrite as he was in 2013 when he was granted parole on 5 lesser charges. So it'll be interesting to see him again after all this time. I, like many people, were a big football fan, and when O.J. Simpson was in the middle of his career, watched him with intense interest. So it's been a long, long trail. We're suddenly back in the mid-'90s again as O.J. Simpson dominates the news today.
Well, and that's right. It does feel like a leap backwards in time. And that leads me to my next question, Jim. I mean, armed robberies happen in this country all the time. Murders happen in this country all the time. Yet it is this singular personality that continues to just capture the imagination of the American people. What is it about O.J. Simpson then and now?
Well, there's many things. First of all, he was, of course, that huge football player with the records in the NFL. And then, of course, he became a spokesperson for big American companies. Among the first African Americans to actually represent huge companies like Chevrolet and Hertz. So he broke through along racial lines. And then here in Los Angeles, he was a figure that lived in Brentwood, one of the richest communities in the United States, and lived alongside very few African Americans, and lived in white society at the time. So he was an interesting figure all the way from the early days of when we began to know O.J. Simpson. This is, as you say, an ordinary robbery. In fact, many people believe that if anybody else had been involved in this armed robbery, that they probably would not even been sentenced to jail at all. Since O.J. Simpson had no record, and since nobody was hurt here, and some of it was his own stuff, he may not have been prosecuted at all. But it's clear, even though the judge denies it, that this very, very strict sentence was in part retribution for what happened in Los Angeles, where he was acquitted, even though there was a mountain of evidence, as the district attorney called it, against him.
You said there was that sense that perhaps O.J. Simpson got played by the system in this case. We also this morning on Good Morning America heard from the Goldman family, the parents of Ron Goldman, who say that it's a shame that the alleged double murder that he committed, that he was held liable for in a civil court, they say it's unfair that that was not taken into account. So you're going to have a family who would be very upset, they say, to see O.J. Simpson back on the streets.
Well, wouldn't you be? I mean, clearly he's been found liable for the murder of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman. Those relatives have a lot to feel sorry about, to feel bad about, to feel pain about. And they, every day I heard one of the Goldman daughters saying that every day he was in prison, they could relax a bit because they knew where he was. It wasn't a matter of safety so much as knowing that he wouldn't be making the news. They wouldn't turn on television and see him again. Now, of course, if he is released on parole, they'll have that again, where they have to be careful about what they watch, what they read, because O.J. Simpson is unlikely to go quietly into the night. He's not that kind of personality.
And Jim, quickly, what do we think his chances are of actually getting this parole today as we see these members take their seats?
Well, the legal experts that I've talked to say that it's 50-50, maybe a little bit better than 50-50, that he will get out. He has been a model prisoner inside the prison. You'll notice that today I'm sure he'll be contrite as he was in 2013, apologize. So I think that the chances are that he will be paroled, but it's not a lock.
All right. Well, that is ABC senior national correspondent Jim Avila, and we will have much more from Jim, from Deborah Roberts, who has been tracking this case on the ground, Matt Gutman, who is there on the scene right now. You see the members of that parole board taking their seats there in Carson City. O.J. Simpson, meanwhile, in Lovelock, Nevada, at the correction center there. We will hear from a number of people close to him, nearly all of them in support of him. Special report with George Stephanopoulos now coming your way right now.
This is an ABC News special report. The O.J. Simpson parole hearing. Now reporting, George Stephanopoulos.
Hello, we are coming on the air right now because it is yet another decision day for O.J. Simpson. We want to give you a look right now. That is the Nevada Board of Parole Commissioners. They are in Carson City, Nevada. They're going to be deciding whether O.J. Simpson will get parole for that 2007 armed robbery in Las Vegas. We're also showing the screen the room in Lovelock Prison. That's about 100 miles away from Carson City, where O.J. Simpson will speak to the commissioners via an uplink. I believe the chairman of the Board of Parole Commissioners, Connie Bisbee, is speaking right now. Let's listen in.
Good morning.
There on the right.
This is Officer Batista, Lovelock Correctional Center, caseworker LaFleur.
Okay, gentlemen.
Be joined by his lawyer, Malcolm
What we're going to
Laverne.
be doing this morning is, after the two of you leave the area and back to where you're going to be, I'm going to have Officer Batista, I'm going to have you bring Mr. Simpson in. And
Chairwoman Bisbee is now speaking to Lovelock, Texas, to the Lovelock prison, trying to work through some of the logistics. We do expect to hear from O.J. Simpson. I'm here with Dan Abrams, our chief legal analyst. And Dan, you were saying earlier, there's almost no win for O.J. in speaking to this board.
That's right. He can only hurt his case. Meaning, no matter how good he is, it's not going to sway them. The only issue, I think, is does he say something wrong? Does he not express remorse enough? Does he somehow revert back into relitigating this?
Because failing that, this board, which also granted him parole on other charges back in 2013, is very likely to give him parole, and that means he could go free as early as October 1st.
Well, that's right. Except remember, though, that when he was granted parole on the last charges, there was no chance he was going to walk out a free man. And so the stakes are much higher now. Now, as a technical matter, that shouldn't change the formula, and there's literally a formula that they're going to use. 11 factors with pluses and minuses and numbers and risk assessments. And if they stick to those numbers as closely as they did the first time, when he was deemed to be a low risk, he probably is getting out.
One thing they cannot consider, the 1994 murder of Nicole Brown Simpson, as we see O.J. Simpson walk in to the hearing room right now. Looking more fit than we've seen him in past years. He is joined by his lawyer, Malcolm Laverne.
Thank you.
Let's listen in to the chairman.
And you are James Simpson?
Correct.
And Mr. Simpson, will you please give me your NDOC number for the record?
1027820.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Simpson. And you're represented by whom this morning?
Mr. Malcolm Laverne, my attorney.
Okay, and welcome, Mr. Laverne. Mr.
O.J.
Simpson, the
Simpson,
first thing I'm going to
old.
do is put on the record your notice of this hearing and advisement of rights and ask you if you will recognize your signature for me, please.
Yes, I believe, yes.
Okay, thank you. Having recognized your signature, I'll declare for the record that you've been properly noticed and we'll go forward. I'm Chairman Bisbee.
Okay.
With me this morning to the right is Commissioner Andel. To my left is Commissioner Jackson, and then to her left is Commissioner Porta. We're seeing you this morning.
Dan, as we listen in, there are 4 commissioners right there, 2 more listening in from Las Vegas, and it will take a majority of those 6 to vote on parole.
Right. So if it ends up being a 3-3 tie, because there's one retired member who they haven't filled the spot yet, so there's 6 members. And so if it ended up being a tie, he would get another parole hearing in 6 months from now. But he does need that majority of 4. And remember, the 4 agreed last time, which is why they have 4 there. In theory, they end up agreeing on the decision and they move forward. If they need the other 2, if there's a divide there amongst the 4, they then check in with the other 2 to see if they can resolve it.
Let's listen back in.
Enhancements include both to the kidnapping and the robbery charges, even though they're not necessarily the way I've said it, make that clear. And a caseworker LaFleur, I have a parole eligibility date of October 1, 2017, with a current expiration date of September 29, 2022. Is that correct?
October 1st, the earliest day that O.J. Simpson could go free if the parole board does indeed grant him parole. I'm also here with Deborah Roberts. And Deborah, as we keep an eye on this, this is over a crime he committed back in 2007, an armed robbery in Las Vegas.
A robbery that a lot of his buddies say they didn't even know was going to be a robbery, George. They thought they were going to a hotel room to act tough, to try to get some of his memorabilia back. And a lot of the guys with him that night said only in that moment did they realize, oh no, this is a robbery.
I want to make that clear.
Here comes the questions.
However, since we have a crowd of people here that have not taken advantage of our public meetings before in order to attend a hearing, some of the things I'm going to say are going to get a little bit lengthy. So you will understand everything, but it will be new information for some other folks. So just wanted to let you know that from the get-go. So I will tell you that as appointed members of the Nevada Board of Parole Commissioners, we have an ethical duty to consider each inmate for parole in a fair and consistent manner. Like other parole boards across the country, our responsibilities include needing to balance prisoner rehabilitation with public safety, as well as taking action that considers the interests of justice. So that's what we're doing here this morning. We have adopted a guideline to assist us in making consistent decisions. We apply the elements and factors of our guideline to each inmate being considered for parole. A component of the guideline is our risk assessment. The board uses a scientifically developed, validated risk assessment as part of its parole guideline. The risk assessment helps us determine which inmates are more or less likely to return to prison if we release them on parole. Using a risk assessment is not unique to Nevada, as a number of other state parole boards also use them. We have revalidated our assessment 3 separate times in the past 14 years, and it has consistently shown to be predictive. Using this risk assessment has significantly improved our overall performance. I'm going to go over each of those items of the risk assessment with you at this time. And just as an aside, this risk assessment is being revalidated even as we speak by the JFA Institute. So it's pretty darn predictive is the bottom line here. So my first question for you, Mr. Simpson, were you arrested for the first time at the age of 24 or older?
I was arrested for the first time, I think, at the age of 46 or 47.
Okay, so you were over the age of 24.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And am I correct that you have never been on parole or probation before, therefore you have never had a parole or probation revocation?
That is correct.
Okay. And I have that you were unemployed at the time of this offense because you were in retirement status.
That's correct, yes.
Okay. Now, this is a property conviction. We're currently hearing you on the robberies and the enhancements. And so you have been assessed as a property offender. Now, we've also assessed you as having a substance abuse problem. I'll tell you why that is. You have indicated also in the past that alcohol had a big factor in this particular crime. And the fact that you have spent the last almost 9 years in prison because of an alcohol-related incident would be indicative of having some sort of at least temporary substance abuse problem. So we have scored you with having some history there. We have you as male, and we have that you are currently, well, very recently turned 90 years old. 90, I'm sorry about that.
I feel like it, though.
How about we take 2 decades off and call you 70? Okay. We don't have you as having any gang affiliation, nor has the NDOC found you to have any gang involvement. We do note that you have completed one of the vocational trainings in having completed the computer application course. We note that you have not had any disciplinaries, either current or pending, and that you're currently medium level there at Lovelock Correctional Center. Would you say that all of those items are correct, sir?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, you do score out. Your risk score scores you in a low risk. However, because of your particular offense, that severity is the highest. When we combine your risk score along with your offense severity, our guideline recommendations are that we consider factors. Now, what consider factors means is we consider everything in terms of whether or not you're a risk to reoffend and return to our criminal justice system. And so what we do at this point, when we're looking at the risk score, we also look at what are called aggravating and mitigating factors. Now, aggravating and mitigating factors don't include everything in the world. They're very specific as to what we consider under those items also. So under the aggravating and mitigating factors in your particular case, we have mitigating or positive things for considering you for parole is the fact that you've been disciplinary free throughout your entire period of incarceration. You don't have any prior conviction history. You have community and family support. You have what appears to be stable release plans. You have participated in programming. some rather significant programming. On the aggravating factors, and the only thing that fits under our aggravating characteristics in terms of risk in your situation is that at the time of this offense,
I want to bring Dan Abrams back in here, and let's explain basically what she's just going through in this direct questioning of O.J. Simpson, relatively gentle questioning.
So those are the risk aggravating, mitigating
yes,
things
and they are now talking about aggravating, meaning reasons that they might not be able to grant him parole, mitigating reasons to grant him parole, and you could hear him making it very clear that there are a lot more mitigating than aggravating.
Most of your life in the public spotlight. Yet you go into a hotel room in Las Vegas, bring along 4 other men with you. 2 of them are armed, and rob the 2 victims of property. What were you thinking?
Well, this might be a little long. I'll try to be brief with it. I had been contacted by a man named Ricio. He had contacted me over a period of time, told me that there was some guys that was trying to get him to fence my property, and he thought I should come and get it. Well, I kind of blew him off because I'm really not interested in football property. I don't collect memorabilia, only my own personal items. He was pretty persistent in calling me, and finally I told him, well, see if you get pictures of what they have. He sent me some pictures, and what I saw was my family, my mother's albums, pictures of my kids growing up, certificates of accomplishments of mine, pictures of what I call significant famous people, letters of myself. So I told him I would really like to get this stuff. So after a period of time, through what he described in court as a perfect storm, we all ended up in Las Vegas. You know, I was there for a wedding, and he told me that the property was there. And would I like to try to get the property? I said, of course I would like to get the property. He told me the names of what he thought were the people in the room, and I realized these are friends of mine. You know, actually guys who helped me move and store some of this stuff, right? So on the day of this incident, he came to my hotel to talk about how this would take place. I told him I met with a lawyer last night, and my sister and my daughter and some other friends, and discussed it. I pointed out another lawyer that was at the poolside as a part of this wedding party that was going on. I said I discussed with him, and they told me that I can't do this. If we're going to their home or even to their storage, OJ, you cannot go in there, because if they ask you to leave, you got to leave. I said, Ricio, you got to get him to bring it to a public place. He said, well, let me see what I can do. All of this has been testified to, so I'm not just going, you know. He called me and told me he told them to bring it to his room, and he's going to have it brought to his hotel, and would I come and get it? I said, of course I'll come and get it. He says, a lot of stuff, OJ, you better bring some friends. Well, I had a couple of friends there at the wedding that was going to go with me. He also said you should bring security. And I said, well, I know these guys, I don't think I need any security. I mean, it turns out that one of the guys, Bruce here, I didn't know it was him. I thought it was another guy named Mike, a friend of his, an ex-partner of his. But I said, I don't need any security. Well, later that day, when they arrived at his hotel and spread out my property, he called and he said, they're here. You come here, I'll meet you in the lobby. And you need security, OJ. This guy, Beardsley, big guy. And he's a little weird. You know, I think anybody that knows him knows he's a little different. I still told him this guy is not dangerous, man. But he says, man, bring some security. During the day when he was there, he met people from the wedding, and one guy, McClinton, said he did security in Las Vegas, and it would help his business if he could have me as a client. I told him I didn't need him, but after he insisted that I bring security, I said, I can use your help. I went to the hotel, I met Mr. Riccio in the lobby. The two guys, they also met us there, which was a big mistake, obviously. I realized that quite soon after this. And Mr. Riccio led us to his room, put the key in the door, and let us in. I know I've seen the last 2 or 3 days the media reporting we broke in the room. Well, we didn't break in any room. Mr. Riccio brought us into that room. When I came into the room, I noticed spread out everywhere was my personal property. You know, the only thing I saw that was on display that wasn't mine was some baseballs, and I made it clear to everybody, those are not mine. All I want is my property, and I think there's a tape of it. You hear me on at least 3 or 4 occasions say, I just want my property. Go forward and try to make it a little quicker. At some point, we started, when we're leaving the room, actually I was being pushed out of the room by the security guys because while I was in there and I recognized Bruce was there, I was surprised to see him as he testified. I was shocked really to see him. Bruce has been a friend of mine. He's traveled with me. We've done a lot of business together over the years. And he and I said, man, what are you doing here? You know, he explained to me why he was there and why he had my property there. And I told him, but geez, you should have told me. I accepted, I understood why. You know, it was 06, 07. People were losing their homes. A guy owed him money, couldn't pay him the money, gave him my property to sell. I told him I understood that, but you still should have told me. We had a chance to talk about this at a later date, and he apologized. I accepted his apology. I apologized for these 2 guys that got pointed a gun at him. He's traveled with me. He's known me when I've had security. He's known me when the venue has supplied security, and there were times he even had to act as security for me. He knows I would never, ever direct anybody to point a gun at him or even threaten him. I've never done this in my life. I want to point out, you mentioned all those gun charges. Bruce and Alfred, they made it clear during the trial that I had no weapon. They didn't feel threatened by me, and from what you said, and that I didn't threaten them. It was the other 2 security guys that did that. And I haven't made any excuses in the 9 years that I've been here, and I'm not trying to make an excuse now. They were there because of me, you know. But in no way, shape, or form did I wish them any harm. As I was leaving the room, and this was on the tape too, Bruce said, OJ, hey man, there's a box that's with that stuff. They're Montana prints. Those don't belong to you. Those are mine, man. He told me that because he recognized everything else that I took out of that room was mine, you know? And he also recognized that I wasn't there to steal his stuff, and he knew I would return
whatever was his, and which I attempted to do. I told him we'll leave it at the desk. I'll send you stuff at the desk. We didn't know at the time that this security
Alexander had stole his BlackBerry, you know, phone. But the minute I saw that, I made him send it back, and he gave some cockamamie story in the trial that why he didn't take it back. In any event, I'm no danger to pull a gun on anybody. You know, I never have in my life. I've never been accused of it in my life. Nobody's ever accused me of pulling any weapon on them. And Bruce knows that I would never do that. I never have. I want to also, as a postscript, add that, you know, when I got to Lovelock, the state of California took up the issue of whose property it was. They did an investigation, and they came to the conclusion that it was my property. They turned it over to me. I have it now, you know? So, I mean, it's kind of mind-boggling that they turned over to me property that I'm in jail for trying to retrieve. You know, it was my property. I wasn't there to steal from anybody. And I would never, ever pull a weapon on anybody.
So you believe the property?
It's been ruled legally by the state of California that it was my property, and they've given it to me.
My question was, that's why you went into the hotel room, because you believed that the property was yours.
Yeah, right? You know, whenever he was just telling me, when Riccio was calling me, just telling me this, I wasn't interested. It wasn't until he got actual pictures of what they supposedly had, And because it was family photos and stuff, that's when I got interested in going there, and I only went there to retrieve my own property.
What were you thinking when the guns were being brandished?
Well, I didn't see the guns brandished. I didn't see, you say guns, as I understand it, one guy who was behind me somewhere pointed a gun at him. So I never saw him brandish a gun. When I left there, I called back to the room to ask Bruce, you said that there was some pictures, what do you have? And I asked him, did this Walter Alexander return his cell phone? He told me no, and he says, OJ, it wasn't cool that guy pointed a gun at me. I said, who pointed a gun at you? He says that kind of described who it was. And to be honest, I didn't really believe him at the time. I asked the 3 guys I was with, they all said they didn't see him do it. I got back to my hotel, we waited for these 2 security guys to show up. And the minute they drove up, the first thing I said, man, did you pull a gun in that room? And he swore, no, I haven't, he didn't. And I asked Walter Alexander for the cell phone, and he kind of threw the cell phone to me. But I wasn't aware until I was in the car driving back to our hotel that this guy had actually pointed a gun at him. Now, earlier in the day when he was talking to me, trying to get me to let him come, I didn't hire him. He said it was for free and all of that. He did show me. I didn't know this guy. You know, I knew the Alexander guy, but I didn't know this guy. He showed me his license. He showed me his CCR. You know, I've assumed that the state gives a guy a CCR and stuff. They vetted him. I should have vetted him. I didn't really need him. I knew these guys weren't dangerous.
Well, your version of the offenses differ a little bit about the official records, Mr. Simpson, but moving forward here, considering the fact that what we have on record, weapons were brandished, you were there, property was taken.
Oh, I was there. I mean, I'm sorry.
So my question is for you, is what do you think was the impact on your victims?
Well, I know what the impact was. I mean, we've talked about it. I mean, Mr. Beardsley, we had long talks back then. He told me that he had tried to call my lawyer. He testified in court that he had called my lawyers and tried to tell them in the months previous that guys had my property and they were trying to sell them, but my lawyer never called him back. He actually testified for me, I'm sure you know, during the trial. Bruce and I talked, and you know, Bruce was traumatized by it. Fortunately, as I said, we talked it out. He knew that I would have never condoned what happened. He accepted my apology, and I told him that these guys should be put in jail. If they did that, you know, I wasn't going to defend them. Unfortunately, they got a get out of jail free card when they say OJ told me. Nothing I could do about that. But I want to point out that, you know, Bruce, I knew his family. I mean, when his mother was terminally ill, I'd call, she was a fan, I'd call her and sing to her. The night before or the night of the jury's verdict, his son actually called me and tried to give me a head up on something to do with memorabilia and told me that he and his mother was cheering for me. You know, this family knows that I wouldn't wish any harm on these guys, ever. These guys are friends of mine, and I'd like to think we're friends again.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Simpson.
Good morning, ma'am.
I conducted your last hearing in 2013 with hearing representative Mr. Robin Bates. Do you recall that hearing?
Yes, I do.
All right. At the time, we asked you what your plan would be if we were to grant you 2-year consecutive sentence. And you told us that you were going to complete commitment to change. Have you done that?
No, I haven't. At one point, I couldn't take the course. You know, I took 2 courses that I guess you guys don't give much credit to. It's called Alternative to Violence. I think it's the most important course anybody in this prison can take because it teaches you how to deal with conflict through conversation. I've been asked many, many times here to mediate conflicts between individuals and groups. And it gave me so many tools how to use it to try to walk these guys through, not throwing punches at one another. Also, at one point, a couple of guys came to me and they said, OJ, I understand you're a Baptist. We're Baptists and we have no Baptist service here. Can you help us get a Baptist service here? I worked with them. We now have an ongoing Baptist service that's well attended. I attended religiously, and Pawnee has attended. And I realized in my 9 years here that I was a good guy on the street. I'm sure when Bruce get here, he'll tell you I was always a good guy. But I could have been a better Christian, and my commitment to change was to be a better Christian.
All right, thank you. Well, we do know that you've programmed over your term of incarceration. You have completed victim empathy, alternative to violence, both basic and advanced, and computer application. I'd like you to tell us a little bit more about victim empathy and alternative to violence, and how it will benefit you in the future.
Well, as I said, the alternative to violence courses, I've always thought I've been pretty good with people, and I've basically spent a conflict-free life. I'm not a guy that ever got into fights on the street and with the public and everybody, but as I said, they give you a bunch of little tools about how to talk to people instead of fighting, instead of throwing punches. Tools that I've used here that, is how you talk to people, it's the tone that you use. The victim empathy was, once again, I didn't really see that in this case. I didn't really see that Alfred Beardsley was really affected by it all. But Bruce was affected. Bruce was, I saw that he was affected, and as I said, I would have done anything not to have that happen. If for no other reason, I regret this because he had to have this guy point a gun at him. And he told me, he said, man, the guy put a gun in my face. And I said, as I said in the beginning, I didn't believe it, but I know it's to be a fact now. So, in that empathy course, it pretty much tells the guys who's all there, they have you talk to your victim and what would you say to him, if you were to see him now, and for you to take, responsibility for what you did and to recognize how it affected their lives. As I said, Bruce expressed to me how it affected him, and as I told him, I couldn't be more apologetic for him going through that.
Thank you. I know that alcohol was a factor in the instant offense. Have you addressed this issue as you stated you would?
Well, I think I made it clear back then, I've never had an alcohol problem. And if I took that alcohol course, it would have been more, for my children, in case they ended up having a problem. Well, my kids don't have a problem. I don't think anybody's ever accused me of having an alcohol problem or any kind of substance problem. Of course, on that day, I had drinks on that day, but it was a wedding celebration. But I've never had a substance problem at all. So I didn't.
Okay, well, you told us in our last hearing that you were going to attend AA, and that's the reason for my question. Was a factor in the instant offense. Hadn't you been drinking that day?
Yes, as I said, we were celebrating a wedding thing. I felt that the alternative to violence course and my involvement with the church, I also as recently became the commissioner of the softball league, 18-team league. My primary responsibility was rules enforcement and player deportment. Guys, it's hot. The guys play. They argue. My job is that they get surly with one another to remove them from the game, and if it goes beyond that, to go to Coach Fraley and have them suspended. I've never got any blowback from the guys because they know that I've done the best that I can, and I'm just trying to keep them out of trouble. So my agenda was full. Here I've been active, totally active in all the years I've been here. I don't have much time to sit around and do anything.
I don't know if that answered your question, but
So of all of the programs that you've had an opportunity to complete, what do you believe is the most significant for you personally?
Well, for me personally, it was alternative to violence. As I said, I think that should be mandatory for every inmate here. You know, once again, guys get hot here, and, you know, we've had our share of fights here. And as I said, I've been called in sometimes to try to keep guys from fighting. And you have groups, you know, it's the Serenos are fighting, the Northtown boys, they all, I mean, it's crazy. And most of the time, it's over something really, really stupid. You know, in a basketball game, somebody will say something to somebody, or somebody will go to somebody to complain to them about it, and it's how they complain to them about it that actually initiated the conflict, you know, the fights. So I for the life of me, I don't understand why that is not a mandatory course for everybody here. Excuse me, my mind is trying to think of the other things, but that's the course that I would recommend to everybody. I mean, I took a computer course here, not because I was computer illiterate, but I took the computer course because I sometimes I could never get my kids on the phone, but if you text them or send something to them on a computer, you can get them. So I actually took that course so I could better communicate with my children.
All right, and have these programs prepared you to return to the community setting?
I believe so. You know, I've missed a lot of time, like 36 birthdays with my children, and you know, I spent the 12 years leading up to this incident in Vegas raising two kids in LA. I mean, I'm sorry, in Miami, and you know, with all the media stuff, you know, we got these guys like Jeffrey Felix making up stories and stuff. That was happening out on the street also. But I was able to keep their eye on the ball. They had great grades. They went to the college of their choice, and I ended up missing their graduation because of it. Trust me, I wish it would have never happened. But as I said, the courses that I take, and I hope it helps me more if I run into those conflicts with my kids. I'm not a guy that has conflicts on the street. I don't expect to have any when I leave here, but I feel that I'm much better prepared. But more so from, I think, my commitment to being a better Christian, because I thought I was a good guy. I had some problems with fidelity in my life, but I've always been a guy that pretty much got along with everybody.
Are you humbled by this incarceration?
Oh, yes, for sure. As I said, I wish it would have never happened. I was going to start, I didn't know how we were going to do this, by apologizing to the people of Nevada, because I wish this would have never happened. I apologized to them at my sentencing. You know, there's nothing I can do about this kind of media circus that's going on right now, but I could do something about the whole thing in the beginning. If I would have made a better judgment back then, none of this would have happened. And I take full responsibility, because I should have never. I haven't made any excuses in 9 years. But I should have never allowed these alleged security guys to help me, because it turned out they were only trying to help themselves. If they weren't there, Bruce and I, we tried to do this. We tried to sit down in the room and call this guy Mike Gilbert and discuss it all, but these guys took over and we were unable to do that. If we were able to do that, you would have never heard about this. None of us would be here today.
Dan Abrams, about 30 minutes in, he finally gets to where he wanted to begin, that apology.
Yeah, this is not helping him in its entirety. The goal should be just contrition, talking about how he's going to be better in the future, and instead it sounds like he's relitigating everything that happened and trying to say he really didn't do anything wrong.
At one point, even one of the commissioners said what he was saying was different from the official record. Let's check back in on the questioning.
Thank you, ma'am.
All right, Mr. Simpson. When we grant offenders parole, one of the conditions of parole we will impose is to pay court-ordered restitution to the victims of the crime. According to the judgment of conviction, in this case, you and your co-defendants were ordered to pay $3,560 in restitution. and returned 12 Montana lithographs to the victims. Can you tell us the status of the restitution and the return of the property taken during the robbery?
Well, one, I was unaware of the restitution. I do know about the prints. When I was talking to Bruce on the phone and asking him, was there anything else that should be yours? He said, the cell phone, right? So I said, do you want to come and meet us with that, or or how do you want to do it? Mr. Cashmore, now the guy didn't know, Mr. Cashmore said, hey, I got to go by that hotel, I'll drop it off, right? He testified to this too. This is not an allegation from me. Mr. Cashmore testified to it. So I say, hey, this guy is going to come back, he's going to drop it off at the hotel. His testimony later was that he didn't remember the name of who he was supposed to drop it off to, and that they had decided to screw OJ, we're going to keep this stuff. I mean, this is his testimony in court. The last thing I heard is that he actually tried to use those prints I can't find the word, to get his bail, with his bail bondsman. He was trying to use it as, I can't think of the word.
The restitution
for his bail bondsman. The last that I know of these lithographs was that this Cashmore had him. I didn't know this guy, that he had him, and he testified to the fact in court that he had him.
Let me ask you this.
Yeah. The restitution was paid by my lawyer. Yes.
So the total restitution has been paid, and there is no pending.
Yes.
The property has been returned to the lithographs as well.
I have no idea what this guy is. Oh yeah, he says that they have been returned to him.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Bruce just signaled me that they have been returned to him.
Okay. Thank you. All right.
Thank you, ma'am.
All right. If granted parole as opposed to completing your sentence in prison, you will be under supervision in the community. Why is it better to be in the community than in the prison?
Well, you know, I kids. I've missed a lot of time with those kids. I think I am a guy who's always been a giving guy. I've even on the street. People have always come to me. My reputation has always been that I'm open to the public. I'm open to everybody. Right now I'm at a point in my life where all I want to do is spend time with as much time as I can with my children and my friends, and I'm not looking to be involved with the media. I've had so many offers for interviews when I've been here in Lovelock, and I've turned them all down. I'm not interested in any of that. I've done my time. I've done it as well and as respectfully as I think anybody can. I think if you talk to the wardens, they'll tell you I gave them my word. I believe in the jury system. I've honored their verdict. I've not complained for 9 years. All I've done is try to be helpful and encourage the guys around there, hey man, do your time, fight in court, and don't do anything that's going to extend your time. And that's the life I've tried to live, because I want to get back to my kids and my family.
All right. Do you realize that if you're granted parole, you could be returned to prison for any violation or conditions of parole? Do you understand that?
Yes, sir.
All right. Now,
Yes,
some
sir,
of those
I do.
conditions could be easily as not drinking alcohol to excess, associating with ex-felons, leaving the state without permission, being subject to search and seizure. So there's going to be a whole slew of conditions you're going to have to follow. And do you think you can be successful with the terms of parole?
I'll be on the drink in 9 years, and I haven't missed it. Most of my life, I could be stopped and searched whenever I'm not a guy who lived a criminal life. I'm a pretty straight shooter. I've always tried to be a good soldier, and I have no problem, none whatsoever, in living with those conditions.
Here's the other side of that. As an easily recognized person in the community, if you're granted parole, How will you handle public scrutiny in the community?
Well, I've been recognized ever since I was 19 years old. You know, I'm sure Bruce will tell you, wherever we've been, it's always a crowd. This is not new to me. Rarely have I even in the last 20 years, rarely have I even had any person give me any negative stuff in the street. I mean, people give you looks and everything, but I'm pretty easily approachable. I've dealt with it my whole life, and I really don't foresee any problem dealing with the public now at all.
Okay, and Mr. Simpson, we've been, since we've been made aware that you're requesting to live in Florida, I've asked Captain Shauna Rudy to come to today's hearing and explain the pre-release and interstate compact process.
Surprisingly unfocused, somewhat self-indulgent testimony from O.J. Simpson.
I'm a little surprised because when you talk to a lot of those guys who were with him that night, you know, they talk about, you know, O.J. being this larger-than-life personality and having sort of this big ego. And I sort of thought that maybe you'd see a little bit more, not only contrition, but a little bit more, you know, just sort of, I don't know, a little bit of a step down from that. And instead, he's talking very grandiose about himself, and that actually surprises me.
On a 1 to 10 scale, a 10 with him performing perfectly, I'd say somewhere between a 2 and a 3.
Good morning, Captain.
In terms of how he's doing, he's doing terribly.
No humility.
Safety,
Let's check
Division
back
of Home
in.
Probation. As Chairman Bisbee shared with you, I serve 2 roles. I'm a captain with the Division of Parole and Probation for headquarters, and I also serve as the commissioner for Nevada for the Interstate Compact. When it comes to the Interstate Compact, the things that are looked at is what is your support system in that other state? Are you a resident of the other state as defined by the compact, meaning that you were living there for at least a year prior to the date that you committed the offense? Or do you have resident family there that can serve as your support system? And resident family is fairly specific, but adult siblings and adult children can serve as your resident family sponsor to provide you with that tie to the other state that would allow you to qualify for a transfer. But that's just the first part of it. First, we have to establish what your support system is and whether or not you qualify for that transfer. And then we make the determination if it's in your best interest to request that transfer.
We don't have Matt yet. I'm going to bring this to Dan Abrams.
Once we make that decision,
in some ways, O.J. didn't even present
an offender
the best case he had of what he'd been doing in prison these last 9 years.
Right. I mean, they're basically offering him up softball questions where the answers are obvious. You've got to say, either if you didn't take the course, I tried to, and I've still learned a lot, and I'm a better person than I was, and instead he's relitigating everything, and in fact, he couldn't even take responsibility for the fact that one of the negatives that the parole board determined last time was alcohol use in connection with, he can't even admit that. I mean, look, is this going to make or break it? I don't know, but it's not helping.
You see his lawyer, Malcolm Laverne, next to him. He came off as a man who was not coached by an attorney.
Or uncoachable. One of the two. Either not coached or uncoachable. But this is, this is striking that he is doing so poorly already. I think he was much better last time, by the way, in the 2013 hearing.
We will process that along with the other paperwork and documents that we need to submit to the other state, and they will then have up to 45 days to conduct their investigation on whether or not you qualify for the transfer and whether or not you have a valid plan of supervision. Once they determine that, their caseworkers will forward that through their compact office back to the Nevada compact office. And once we have a decision by that other state, then that would be provided to you through your case manager at the Department of Corrections. That's how the interstate compact part works. On the pre-release side, we have pre-release specialists who work closely with the caseworkers at the Nevada Department of Corrections. and they help to develop that valid plan of supervision we were talking about. What is your plan of release? Where do you want to go to? Who's your support system? Once they make that determination, they process the information that's necessary. And in this case, if you were to apply for an interstate compact, our pre-release specialists would be the ones to forward those documents to the other state for their consideration. Once the determination was made and once a valid plan was developed, then they would work with your caseworker to set up your release, and your caseworker would then manage the release through the Nevada Department of Corrections.
Does the panel have any questions for Captain Arruti? Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, Mr. Laverne, I'm going to defer to the two of you and Mr. Simpson. We'd like Mr. Simpson to be able to tell us anything else he'd like to tell us. We'd also like to hear from one of the supporters if one of them wishes to make a brief statement to the board. And we would also like to hear your statement, Mr. Laverne. So I'm going to put that back to you as to what order you want those three things to happen.
We're going to hear from Mr. Simpson's daughter, Arnell Simpson, first, and then I'll make some closing remarks.
Okay. And Officer Batista, if you will make that switch for us, please.
Thank you.
Arnell Simpson, OJ's 48-year-old daughter. You see her right there. She's played a significant role in this litigation. She says she was in Las Vegas at the time of the robbery, when the robbery took place.
Good morning, ma'am. And if you will give us your name and for the record and your relationship to Mr. Simpson.
Yes, I am Arnell Simpson, my dad's oldest child of four.
Welcome, and feel free to speak.
Thank you. I'm a little nervous, so bear with me. So are we. I know it's a lot. As you know, I'm here on behalf of my family for the purpose of expressing what we believe is the true character of my father. No one really knows how much we have been through this ordeal in the last 9 years. Excuse me. My experience with him is that he's like my best friend and my rock. And as a family, we recognize that he is not the perfect man, but he's clearly a man and a father who has done his best to behave in a way that speaks to his overall nature and character, which is always to be positive no matter what. He has spent the last 9 years in Lovelock, as we all know, and has been a perfect inmate, following all the rules and making the best of the situation, which is truly amazing to me under the circumstances. The choice that he made 9 years ago that resulted in the sentencing were clearly inappropriate and wrong and counterproductive to what we were all there at the wedding of a very good friend. As his daughter, I can honestly say my dad recognizes that he took the wrong approach and could not handle the situation. He could have handled it differently. My siblings, I, and family know that he didn't make the right decision on that day, but we know that his intentions were not to go in and to just make the wrong decision at the wrong time. Throughout this ordeal, we have remained close. We have stayed strong. And I, for myself, am grateful to God for giving us the strength to get through this last 9 years and to stay positive always, no matter what. And a lot of that is because of him. So on behalf of my family, my brother, my sister, an aunt, an uncle, his friends, we just want him to come home. We really do. We want him to come home. And I know in my heart that he's very humbled throughout the situation. This has been hard. Let me be honest. This has been really, truly hard. And there's no right or wrong way to explain how to handle this. But we do know that, I know that he is remorseful. He truly is remorseful. And we just want him to come home so that we can move forward for us, quietly, but to move forward. So I thank you for allowing me to be here this morning. I thank you.
O.J. Simpson said he wanted to leave prison to spend more time with his family. Deborah Roberts, in 5 minutes there, Arnell Simpson more effective than O.J. Simpson in 30.
I think she sort of summed up what everybody thought they might hear from him, which is he did the wrong thing, he's remorseful, this has been very hard on his family. Arnell's visited him in prison multiple times over the years, and she certainly did give you that sense of family and humanity.
O.J. back before the microphone.
Mr. Simpson, to make any closing remarks that you'd like to make.
Well, thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Commissioner. Do you the letter I provided through your liaison? It's an undated letter from Mr. Simpson to Assemblyman Osvaldo Fumo. That should have been provided to you.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir. We
So,
should have that
all right.
on the record.
So give me 2 seconds to get set up here, because that's where I'm going to start. Did you take the letter? Did you take the letter? Find it. I can't find it now. So.
O.J. Simpson's attorney, Malcolm Laverne.
And the letter, as you can see, is very short, so I think it would be appropriate just to read it into the record, if the commissioners would allow me to.
That'd be fine.
Okay.
He'll be reading a letter
But the
from
first thing I
O.J.
have to do is
Simpson.
find it. Here it is. By way of setting this letter up, by the way, the most important part about this letter is that this was not a letter that Mr. Simpson provided to me, okay? What happened is Mr. Simpson at some point wanted me to communicate with an individual by the name of Osvaldo Fumo. He's an assemblyman now, and prior to that time, and still now, he's an attorney. And in the interest of full disclosure, he actually was one of Mr. Simpson's attorneys during the habeas proceedings related to this case. But since that time, Osvaldo, or Ozzie as I call him, he's a friend of mine too, he became an assemblyman with the Nevada Legislature. And after that, Mr. Simpson sent Mr. Fumo a letter, and I found out about that letter not through Mr. Simpson. I found out about this letter through Mr. Fumo when I was advised to thank Ozzie Fumo for providing some books and some educational equipment to the prison here at Lovelock, Nevada. And so I'm going to read that letter. And by the way, Mr. Simpson did authenticate this letter this morning. I'd only produced this to him this morning when I got to see him prior to this hearing. He did indicate that he was the one who wrote this letter. And even though it's not dated, he indicated it was probably sent to Ozzie within the last 9 months or so. Dear Legislator Fumo, first of all, allow me to say how happy I was to hear about your new position as a state legislator, although I was not surprised to hear about your interest in furthering the education and helping of prison inmates. I must admit, I've always taken my exposure to education for granted, partly due to my prowess as an athlete. I have always been afforded opportunities for higher education. It wasn't until I got to prison that I realized just how many people did not have the exposure to said education, in part because of their circumstances, i.e. gangs, bad neighborhoods, lack of parental supervision, poverty, etc. But Ozzie, I can't tell you how inspiring it is to see how said inmates have taken advantage of the educational department and the advantages that it offers. I have seen a change in some inmates as far as their self-esteem goes that is amazing. They come to me to talk about subjects that they would never would have never even thought about before their exposure to education. They talk to me about things they want to do when they are released, things they never would have thought about they were capable of before. They say, quote, "You can't teach an old dog new tricks," end quote, and as a, quote, "old dog," end quote, my friend, I can tell you that is not true. I am currently taking a computer science course, or just a computer course that has shown me that even I am capable of learning new skills. These new skills, at the very minimum, will help me better communicate with my children. Who knows, you may even see a webcast or blog in my future. I work in the athletic department here at Lovelock, and I fully enjoy what I do and can tell you that this is very important for the inmates to have a release for their energy and for recreation. But I can think of no better place to use state funds than to educate, add to their self-esteem, and to prepare these guys for their eventual release. In closing, I want to tell you how much I look forward to following your political career and your participation in what I know will be a very successful prison educational program. Gratefully yours, Orenthal J. Simpson. And it's signed by Mr. Simpson. And the reason I said this to you is because, and just kind of surprise Mr. Simpson with it, is because obviously this is Mr. Simpson's, what I would consider one of Mr. Simpson's first opportunities to have clout in the political system of the state of Nevada. He pretty much has an end at that point. He has Ozzie Fumo, who they had an attorney-client relationship with, a very good relationship, and now Ozzie is in the assembly. He's in a position of power. And what does Mr. Simpson do? Does he say, "Ozzie, can I have a better bed?" Or does he say, "Ozzie, can you pull some strings, get me out of here earlier?" No, he doesn't do any of that. He uses that clout. The one time he has some clout in the state of Nevada, he uses that clout to obtain funding for books and education in this prison. And some of those men, as Mr. Simpson said, they really are going to get out and they're going to have a decent and a better life for themselves as the result of Mr. Simpson's efforts through Mr. Fumo. I think that's the definition of character. And frankly, I think if it was me personally, who had been in prison for 9 years, and frankly, forget 9 years, 9 days, if I had that opportunity in a position of someone in a position of power who could do something for me like this, I would be saying, "Get me out of jail," okay? But he doesn't do that. It is very, very, very selfless. He's thinking about the people here, and it's also the definition someone had asked earlier about being humbled and some humility. It also shows a genuine form of humility that he has the capabilities to think of people here who are not as empowered and not as privileged as he has been, and when he gets out, probably will continue to be in society. So that's the first part of my closing remarks. The second part of my closing remarks is to deal with the other individual in this case that was a victim. He's not here. Mr. Fremong is sitting right here, and that's Mr. Beardsley. Mr. Beardsley, as you, I'm sure, are aware, is no longer with us. He passed away in about November of 2015. However, Mr. Beardsley and Mr. Fremong have made calls to my office, and I've spoken to them both at various points. And the last time I recall speaking to Mr. Beardsley was in September of 2011. This is not that long after I
Dan Abrams, I'm not a lawyer,
Mr. Simpson for a couple of years.
but I'm not sure that pulling out that letter would have been the first thing I would do were I representing O.J. Simpson.
I don't know what he's doing. I mean, he's sitting there reading from this letter that O.J. Simpson wrote to a legislator talking about how good the educational opportunities are for the other guys. So number one, he's not talking about himself and his contrition and how sorry he is, which is what that letter should have said. And number two, he's somehow trying to get credit for the fact that he didn't ask him to get him out of jail, as if some state legislator is going to be able to get him out of jail. I mean, this is absurd.
He indicated in
Check back in. He's talking about one of the
uncertain
victims.
terms in that conversation that he had cleared up this matter with Mr. Simpson. He was trying his hardest to do whatever he wanted to get Mr. Simpson out of prison, and they had just made it right. Mr. Simpson had apologized to him, and they had just basically made it right. And he was and he had sent letters to Mr. Simpson and Mr. Simpson hadn't responded, and that was probably on the advice of counsel at the time. And then also there was another issue and Mr. Simpson has raised this issue, and I want to emphasize this again. that Mr. Beardsley had a set of photos, and these are not memorabilia. Mr. Simpson, if he didn't make his point already, he could care less about some signed football or some signed photos. He could care less about it. He could rip them up and burn them up. I know they mean a lot to a lot of people, but that was not what was really the true impetus for what happened here. What was the true impetus is that there were intimate family photos that were taken from him, literally stolen. And there's no dispute that these would not be any type of judgment, collections. These are just intimate family photos. Mr. Simpson had a former family. He had a second family. There's pictures of him with his mother and other things, famous celebrities, and they were not subject to being taken. They probably have no value to most people, but they have all the value in the world of Mr. Simpson. They're not footballs, and that's what set it off. And Mr. Beardsley had these photos, or he at least represented to me on the phone that he had these photos, and I had made every effort that I could to try and obtain those intimate family photos that I was well aware were basically all Mr. Simpson wanted in the first place. Unfortunately, whatever happened, Mr. Beardsley was never able to get those to me. He explained that he had them, and I tried to make every effort to get those from him. And then at some point along the line, we lost contact, and then I just discovered that he had passed away. But I will speak on Mr. Beardsley's behalf from that phone conversation that at least as of September of 2011.
I think one of the big questions here is when you went through the beginning of this hearing, they ticked through that risk assessment.
And finally,
O.J. Simpson's score was very low, 3. That is considered low risk if he is let out. The question I have is how much leeway then do the commissioners have factoring in everything they've heard over the last hour, or is this kind of pre-cooked before it goes in?
Look, as I said at the top of this, it was his to lose. I think coming into this, there was the sense that O.J. Simpson was going to be released here. I don't think he's helped his case. Is it possible he'll lose a commissioner or two in the context of what he said? Probably not, because we're literally looking at an 11-factor form, which is supposed to be filled out somewhat methodically.
And he's met the marks.
Yeah. I mean, you would think that nothing's significantly changed since 2013, but I'll tell you one thing that has changed is this performance. He's much worse here than he was in 2013. I don't think his lawyer's helping his case, and as a result, it gets a little closer.
Our colleague Jim Avila has also covered O.J. for most of the last 20 years, as have you, the original trials. This is the same O.J.
Yeah. Jim was just saying that to us in our internal system here. It is. It's the exact same O.J. I remember talking to O.J. Simpson in the civil case in the hallways all the time, and it was always
nobody's telling you how to testify here. And one
about
of the things we did,
deflection, never taking responsibility, never admitting anything, and it's the same O.J. Jim's right.
Back to the room.
And one of the things that we did spend a lot of time, I mean, that was a small portion of our conversations, was the remorse on Mr. Simpson's part that Mr. Fumo accepted. Most of the time we were talking about some other unfortunate things that happened with Mr. Fumo. I know because I've researched this now. There was some civil litigation that went on out there, and this was against primarily against one of the uncharged co-defendants in this case, individual named Riccio. Something happened in this civil litigation, and I don't know what's going on with it at this point in time, other than Mr. Fumo addressed those concerns with me. I told him that I would look into it. I explained to him that he really should talk to his lawyers who were involved in that civil litigation to try and make that judgment do whatever he wants it to do. And it was unfortunate. I believe that this kind of is an opportunity to show you that in the criminal case he's completely the victim, but he filed this civil lawsuit, and the jury actually found Fumo 16% liable for what happened here. It was pretty unique, to say the least. In any event, Mr. Fumo is going to testify, but I did feel that I needed to note that I don't think I have a point to prove with Mr. Fumo, other than he did represent that he was going to testify favorably for Mr. Simpson, and that he did discuss with me on multiple occasions this idea of some civil judgment out there that he was hoping that Mr. Simpson could take care of for him. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Simpson,
closing remarks?
I hadn't heard any, except that, I've come here I've spent 9 years making no excuses about anything. I am sorry that things turned out the way they did. I had no intent to commit a crime. I came here, I tell the inmates all the time, man, I don't want to hear about your crime. You know, argue in court here, we're all convicts. I'm a convict. Do your time and don't do anything to extend your time. I told the warden when I got here, Mr. LaGrange, I think it was, Ms. Carpenter and Ms. Megan, that I would be no problem. I believe in this jury system. I will honor what the jury said, and I will be no problem, you know, and I think I kept my word. As I said, I've done my time. I'd just like to get back to my family and friends, and believe it or not, I do have some real friends, but I don't think I could have represented this prison. I don't think any inmate has ever represented it better than I. I did my time. I tried to be helpful to everybody. And as I said, Bruce and Beardsley, I made up with them years ago, you know. So I'm sorry it happened. I'm sorry to Nevada. I wish Riccio had never called me. I thought I was glad to get my stuff back, but it wasn't worth it. You know, 9 years away from your family is just not worth it. And I'm sorry. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Just one more thing for the record. Your expiration is, as of today, 9/29/22, and for all those people in the world wonder how that adds up to 33 years in the state of Nevada. Good behavior, complying with the rules, can mean up to a 50% reduction off the back end of your sentence. If granted parole, that September 29, 2022 time could even move closer. So I wanted to put that on the record. And at this point, I'll ask Officer Batista if you will move Mr. Laverne and Mr. Simpson again, and we invite Mr. Fromong to the table, please.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. We will now hear from Bruce Fromong, who was one of the victims of O.J. Simpson on that day back in 2007. As you just heard O.J. say, he felt he made good with Mr. Fromong many years ago, and now we're going to hear him testify on O.J.'s behalf.
If you will put in the record for us, please, and then proceed.
Yes, it is Bruce Fromong, and I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to be able to speak today. First and foremost, I'd like to state that I'm not here just as Mr. Simpson's friend of almost 27 years, because that I am, but today I'm also appearing as the victim of the crime on September 30th, or September 13th of 2007. On that day, I felt that Mr. Simpson was misguided, not by himself, but also by Tom Riccio. He was led to believe that on that day there were going to be thousands of pieces of his personal memorabilia, pictures of his wife, from his first marriage, pictures of his kids, Arnell and Jason, family heirlooms. He was told there were going to be possibly his wife's wedding ring, thousands of things. He was misled about what was going to be there that day. A man named Thomas Riccio had promised him this big package. In reality, Thomas Riccio had never met me. Never had met me in his entire life until the night of the robbery. He got there and saw all this stuff. He went down, he got OJ, and instead of telling him that that's not what was there, he brought him up anyway. And when OJ got there, unfortunately he was already worked up and had people with him that were hollering and screaming. There was a lot of commotion going on in a very, very small room. Real small room, wasn't it, OJ? And a lot of things happened very quickly. And unfortunately, If OJ had just said, everybody out of here, Bruce and I need to talk for a minute, none of this needed to happen. But that didn't happen. And it took, one of the things I want to make clear is that it took me 2 years in a California court, because in a judge's infinite wisdom, instead of going ahead and turning things into a California court, straightened out. And after having to fight the Goldman's lawyers, OJ's lawyers, and it took me 2 years to get back with over 600 items. A majority of it did come back to me because I had to go back 19 years through our friendship, but I had to go back 19 years, produce records for almost 98% of this stuff. And it is true that items in that room belonged to OJ. There were no two ways about it. But it's also true that I have never stolen anything from OJ. I have never stolen from OJ. I think OJ will admit that I did not ever take anything from you. It wasn't me. An ex-partner of mine and his mistress, Christy Lukemeyer, have taken things. Other people have taken things from OJ, but I have never stolen from OJ. OJ is my friend, always has been, and I hope will remain my friend. But there were things in that room, and I admit to that. I'm sorry things did not work out differently, but there were, and I will make this clear to you, OJ never held a gun on me. There was a coward in that room, a man named McClinton, came up gangster style, acting like a big man. He held the gun on me, not OJ. Another man came in, hit me, not OJ. He never laid a hand on me. A lot of people were yelling, "Bag that stuff up. Let's get out of here." During the trial, after I testified against OJ, and this is why I absolutely believe him. After I had already testified against OJ, I'd already said everything I had to say. We happened to pass each other in the hallway. He came up to me and said, "Can I talk to you for a minute?" And we had a chance to talk to each other. And I told him I'm sorry that I did not get the opportunity to call him and tell him that I had that stuff. Those few items that belonged to him, I told him I'm sorry that take the opportunity to call him, because we'd been apart for a long time. We hadn't had a chance to talk for many, many years. And I'd been from Mike Gilbert, and I wish I had it. And he said, "Bruce, sorry, how sorry." And we've got a saying between us, "It is what it is." And he put his hand out, and I said, "I forgive you." We all make mistakes. OJ made his. He's been here, and from what I've told, he's been a model inmate. He's been an example to others. During the trial, I recommended that he serve 1 to 3 years. That's what I recommended to the DA. And I'm here to say that I've known OJ for a long time. I don't feel that he's a threat to anyone out there. He's a good man. I know that he does a lot for other people. And I feel that 9.5 to 33 years was way too long. And I feel that it's time to give him a second chance. It's time for him to go home to his family, his friends, This is a good man. He made a mistake. And if he called me tomorrow and said, Bruce, I'm getting out, will you pick me up? Juice, I'll be here tomorrow for you. I mean that, buddy.
Thank you. We appreciate your comments and we appreciate you
Today, thank you.
Thank you.
So, Mr.
Thank you for this
Laverne
opportunity.
You're welcome. Mr. Laverne and Mr. Simpson, if you'll return to the table, please.
And before we will break for deliberation, I want to
Do they have any other last questions? Anything that... Okay. What's going to happen now is deliberation. Again, another thing we do with every single case, but a little differently today because, frankly, we need our offices back, folks. So we're hoping to deliberate, come to an agreement, and be able to produce an order sometime in the next 30 minutes or so. So what's going to happen is we are going to break and then after deliberating, we'll come back to this room. I'll ask each commissioner to vote. I'll vote myself. If we are able to agree when those votes are cast, that will be a final decision. If it becomes obvious that there is a split on this particular panel, I have Commissioners Eddie Gray and Commissioner Michael Keeler stand by in Las Vegas, and we will call them, they will either cast a vote then or ask for to return to deliberation. So that is what we're planning at this moment. We are about to leave the room. I know Officer Batista is going to arrange to clear the courtroom there also. I ask that here that you give us about 2 minutes to clear out of the room so that you're not chasing us down the hall. And then we'll give you a 5-minute notice that our deliberation is over and that we're ready to cast votes. So on that, I will call this hearing into recess, and we will return after deliberation.
So there you have it. This is going to be quick. You just heard from the chairman, Connie Bisbee, there that the 4 commissioners there in the room, 2 more in Las Vegas, are going to go to a room right next door, deliberate. She said probably less than 30 minutes, and then come back in open session and vote one by one on what they think should happen with O.J. Simpson. If he gets 4 votes for parole, it will be granted. He would be eligible for release as early as October 1st. O.J. probably ended on his strongest note, saying he's sorry, making no excuses. He had no intent to commit a crime and that he's done his time. He also apologized to the state of Nevada. That is where the Lovelock Correctional Center is. Dan Abrams, he did help himself at the end.
Yeah, the closing argument was exactly what his tone should have been throughout, which is accepting responsibility, apologetic. It's not the O.J. we heard at the beginning. But look, I think in the end, he's probably still going to get parole. And the fact that it's such a short deliberation, I think, actually helps that. It basically says, we'd already decided what we're going to do. We had all the documents, we had our forms, we had our 11 factors, we had our scores. I think that O.J. Simpson would have had to do something more radically bad than we saw here for him not to get parole. But on the whole, I don't think it was a great performance from Simpson, but not bad enough to fundamentally change
And
the
Deborah Roberts, Bruce Vermong, who was in the room that day, who was one of the victims, also brought tears to the eyes of O.J. when he said, Juice, I will be there for you when you come out.
It was striking, George, because I think that's what people were looking for from O.J. Simpson. They wanted to see that remorse. They wanted to see that humility, those tears. But I think he did open himself up for criticism for later on with so much detail, because a lot of those guys with him that night tell different stories. And did he really need to go down that road to have people debating again what happened? Maybe he should have kept it compact, but it was interesting to see him very much moved at the very end by his friend Vermong.
Matt Gutman, outside the Lovelock Correctional Center. What may be going most for O.J. right now is how he comported himself while he was in that prison.
That's right, George. Guards have told us that he said yes, sir, no, sir, was always respectful. And as you heard during the hearing, O.J. did talk about all the things that he did. He was the commissioner of a softball league. He was an umpire. He worked in the gym. He did everything that he should have done. Yes, he was treated with kid gloves at times, but he was respected by the guards, showed them respect. That's not exactly the person we saw today. So it was a little bit shocking, a little bit surprising. However, O.J. has a lot going for him right now, and I think Bruce Fromong was really the ace in his hole, and he probably struck the kind of tone that O.J. should have had from the beginning, essentially supporting everything that O.J. tried to argue while relitigating the case in the beginning of the hearing. I agree with Dan. It seems like O.J. has a pretty good chance at getting parole here, but it was looking touch and go there for a while.
Yeah, one of the things that surprised me, Dan, is in some ways how unprepared O.J. was for this. I mean, he knew exactly what was going to happen coming in. He knew which questions were going to be asked. He had an opening statement prepared, and then and even by his own admission, seemed to get confused and went off and relitigated the case.
And even when it came to the closing statement, said, I haven't prepared anything, sort of he hadn't thought it out, et cetera. That is really hard to believe. You would think that for the last year and a half, he's been thinking about this day, this opportunity, this chance to get out of prison after 9 years. And it felt like he was kind of winging it, which is amazing.
Matt Gutman?
I was just going to add in that one of the most surprising things about O.J.'s testimony just now was that he said he didn't do that substance abuse problem. It was one of the mitigating factors, one of the aggravating factors that got him in here was that drunken night in Las Vegas in which he made a clearly terrible decision to try to steal back his own memorabilia. They say you serve time, and that's what you have in 9 years in prison. You have a lot of time. Why not take that substance abuse course? That was one of the things that was most surprising to me. O.J. Simpson denying flatly that he ever had an alcohol problem, so that maybe had his kids had struggled with alcohol, then maybe he would have taken that program. But that is clearly something that the board wanted to hear him say, yes, I had a problem, I've taken care of it, it's over now, and my future life as citizen O.J. Simpson will be far different than my life previous to my incarceration.
Could have easily helped himself there. He did say that he hadn't had a drink in 9 years and hadn't missed it at all. One of the things not at issue today, not a factor, at least an official factor for the parole board, of course, the killing of Nicole Simpson and Ron Goldman back in 1994. There was a civil judgment later in 1997 against O.J. Simpson, a $33 million civil judgment. And this morning I had the chance to speak to Ron's father, Fred, and his sister, Kim, about how they would feel as they watch this today. Take a look.
Needless to say, upset. What's troubling to me is not only him, but the whole system gives second chances to violent felons, or for that matter, anyone in jail. Ron doesn't get a second chance.
And Kim, you've said that these last several years with O.J. in prison have been a reprieve that now may be over.
Yeah, I mean, we lived our life with him walking the streets and sharing the same roads that we did. And with him being locked up in Lovelock, it's been a chance for us to kind of reclaim some control over our life and have some semblance of sanity. So I'm preparing myself for that to be changing come October.
One of the reasons he's likely to get parole is because he was never convicted, as we all know, of the murder, even though that civil jury, 12 jurors found him liable. Now, the parole board doesn't take that into account, but you and your attorneys think they should have.
Absolutely. I think his whole history of violence, ignoring the law, no respect for the law, no remorse for virtually anything he's ever done is an indication of who he is as a person. I don't think there's any reason to think that he's going to be a decent human being into society. I think he's proved otherwise.
Fred Goldman clearly does not believe that justice will be served here. Dan Abrams, if O.J. is indeed let out of prison on October 1st, the Goldmans will try to collect on that civil judgment. His pensions are safe, but if he earns outside money, perhaps they could get some?
Oh, absolutely. They should get all of it. I was sort of troubled by a reference, I think it was from Bruce Fromong, about sort of the Goldman's lawyers going after him as if that was some horrible thing. Can you imagine that the Goldman's lawyer, of course the Goldman's lawyers are going to be going after O.J. Simpson. He owes them $33 million.
And they would argue that it's been rising, that it's actually more than $33 million.
Exactly. And they would say that they actually haven't seen a penny of it because O.J. Simpson, they believe, was signing memorabilia, et cetera, underground, making sure that they never were able to track exactly what he was making. But any money that he officially makes outside of protected money, like a pension, et cetera, would be money that the Goldmans should be able to get access to because they are owed an enormous amount.
We also have on the phone Dr. Henry Johnson, a longtime friend of O.J. Simpson as well. Your reflections on how he did today?
I think O.J. handled himself quite honorably. You know, O.J. is a strong man. He's a humble man. And I think he did a great job.
And what's your sense of what he will do if he is indeed released?
I think that he will re-embrace with his family and friends. And he will take a pause. He has to, you know, obviously walk the line. He's still going to be on parole, so it will still be under the jurisdiction of the state of Nevada. But O.J. has always been, to me, as long as I've known him for over 20 years, and he's always been an upright individual, and I believe he will carry on. As a matter of fact, I believe that O.J. will rise once again, and people will recognize that an innocent man has been persecuted for the last 25 years.
But he was found liable for the deaths by a jury of 12 people, a jury of his peers. He does owe the Goldman family, according to that judgment, $33 million. Don't you accept that?
Well, let me say something in honor of the deceased. Because if Ron and Nicole could be here today, they would tell you that you got the wrong guy.
You don't know that.
Yes, I do. And I'll tell you why.
Go ahead.
I would tell you this. Contrary to the great American delusion, Nicole spoke to her mother by phone at midnight while O.J. signed autographs on the red-eye flight. And they hid the phone records from jury. The jury was only shown some fake, fraudulent phone records that supported Marcia Clark's phony timeline. Nicole and Ron did not get killed until after midnight. And you would have to be an absolute fool to assume that one guy could kill two people at a night with a knife and nobody heard anything.
Dan Abrams covered the trial.
I'm one of the fools. So I'm one of those fools who covered the criminal trial in its entirety, covered the civil case in its entirety. And I think that for those who say we have to accept jury verdicts, then you accept both jury verdicts, right? And the reality is O.J. Simpson was a free man. And the reality is that a civil jury still believed that he was responsible for the killing of Nicole Brown and Ron Goldman. And I think it's really, I think it's disrespectful, actually, to their memories to have comments like this being made, suggesting that the case was all a fraud and this and that. I mean, I could sit here and list for you from the civil case things that came out because O.J. had to testify, things that didn't come out in the criminal case, which make it so much clearer than it was even in the criminal case that O.J. Simpson did it.
I want to go back to Matt Gutman at the Lovelock Correctional Center. Give us some sense of what will happen in these intervening couple of months if indeed O.J. is set for release on October 1st.
He just sits and waits for at least a couple of months here in Lovelock, goes back to his routine, cold cereal in the morning, goes back to the gym, cleans it up, walks around the track whenever he can. But at some point near October 1st, if he does get parole, he'll probably be moved to another facility, probably closer to Reno or more likely Las Vegas. And from there, he'll be released. And again, we probably won't know exactly when he will be released. They'll probably try to do that quietly. And, we won't know exactly where he's going, although the clear indication from that hearing is that he does want to go back to Florida, where he had a home. He lost it to foreclosure, but that's where his two youngest children are, and that is where he likes to play golf. He has a lot of friends, including Tom Scota, who was there in the room and says he will help take care of O.J. He's one of the people who said that had O.J. been with me that night, I would have taken care of him. So that's what we think he's going to do.
What we will know, likely within the next 30 minutes, is whether O.J. Simpson will indeed get parole from that Board of Commissioners, the Nevada Parole Commission. It takes 4 votes. You saw the commissioners there. There are 2 others in Las Vegas. They are deliberating now. We will come back when they have a decision. Stay with us.
This has been a special report from ABC News.
And we hope you will stick with us right here on ABC Digital. Hello, I'm Brad Milkey. As we just heard there, that you still have these 4 parole commissioners on the board there deciding whether O.J. Simpson will walk out of Lovelock Correctional Facility a free man a few months from now. That is, if he gets parole. He said that this was a mistake, the armed robbery that he took part in 9 years ago, that he's making no excuses, that he's never made any excuses. But you also heard that defiant defense of himself, as Dan Abrams and George Stephanopoulos just said, relitigating the case that was laid out against him that he was convicted for on that night then. So I want to go to ABC's Jim Avila, senior national correspondent, who's there in Los Angeles. And Jim, you've been following this case and the cases around O.J. Simpson for 25 years. And they referenced you there on the special report. As you said, it's the same old O.J.
Yeah, I didn't see much difference from the O.J. Simpson that I watched shortly after his arrest back in 1994 and then through the trial, and where he denied being involved in Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman's murders. Lots of excuses, lots of pointing of fingers. Remember back in the original Simpson trial that it was some Colombian drug dealers who they pointed their fingers at as doing the killing. No evidence of that ever came out. O.J. Simpson said that he would not rest until he found the killers. There's been no evidence that he ever attempted to find the killers since then. One of the things that was that really stuck out for me, and that I can't imagine what the Goldmans were thinking as they watched this, when O.J. Simpson said that that he had never been a fight type of guy, that violence was not his way of going about things. There was no mention at all in this parole hearing, and we understand why, but no mention of the violence that was done upon Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman. Terrible violence that, in fact, a civil jury found that O.J. Simpson was responsible for. So I think that was, while the parole hearing has its rules, it was the elephant in the room the entire time was O.J. Simpson was able to say that he was a nonviolent man, had never had any issues with violence, when we know from the trial that not only was he accused of murdering them in a very violent way, but there was audio and video records of him beating up his wife, and that was never mentioned. She called in utter terror. Those 911 calls were played, and I can remember hearing just how frightened she sounded. There were pictures of her bruised face. There was testimony from the police officers who arrived at the Brentwood mansion to a Nicole Brown Simpson hiding in the bushes saying he's going to kill me. So for him to sit in that parole hearing and say that he has a reputation as a nonviolent man is just stunning.
And Jim, as you said, he lived a conflict-free life even after he had pleaded no contest to beating Nicole Brown. And now we're joined here in studio by Deborah Roberts. Thanks for being back here.
Hey, Brad.
And so, Deborah, you sounded surprised as anyone to see how O.J. Simpson himself comported himself in that hearing.
Well, having talked to a lot of those guys who were with him that night, and guys who have conflicting stories and conflicting feelings about O.J. Simpson, some of them angry with him, some of them calling him a liar still, I sort of expected him to sort of just in some way try to smooth that over, to sort of apologize in some way for lives that he's affected, lives that he may have ruined, and just people he's hurt. And I think that most of us, George Stephanopoulos, Dan Abrams, and myself, were a little surprised that he didn't in some very small way. I guess at the end he did talk about feeling contrite and sorry for what he had done, but I just thought that maybe he would have somehow thrown out an olive branch to those folks instead of stirring up the story again and having these conflicting stories about what happened that night.
And even if you don't consider what happened with Nicole Brown and with Ron Goldman, he even tried to relitigate parts of the case itself, of the assault case. We have a clip of O.J. Simpson talking right here about how he never pulled a gun on anyone. Let's take a look.
In any event, I'm no danger to pull a gun on anybody. I never have in my life. I've never been accused of it in my life. Nobody's ever accused me of pulling any weapon on them. And Bruce knows that I would never do that. I never have. I want to also, as a postscript, add that, you know, when I got to Lovelock, the state of California took up the issue of whose property it was. They did an investigation, and they came to the conclusion that it was my property. They turned it over to me. I have it now, you know? So, I mean, it's kind of mind-boggling that they turned over to me property that I'm in jail for trying to retrieve. You know, it was my property. I wasn't there to steal from anybody. And I would never, ever pull a weapon on anybody.
I'd like to get reaction from Deb and from Jim, you too, in Los Angeles. Jim, what are your thoughts as you were seeing that in real time?
Well, I can tell you that the reason why one of those guys had a gun, according to testimony, was because O.J. Simpson asked him if he could bring some heat. So, you know, relitigating the case today is not very smart because these commissioners have read the court records, as the one guy pointed out, and what O.J. Simpson said today was, in fact, in conflict with what was testified in court. Now, there are experts who say, legal experts who say that O.J. Simpson probably did not deserve 33 years for stealing back his own stuff, but it was an armed conflict inside that hotel room, and there was a crime that was committed, and O.J. Simpson didn't seem to want to acknowledge that today.
I think Jim has a very good point there. He didn't seem to acknowledge the obvious, which at the end of the day, he is in prison because it was a crime. Now, there are plenty of people, not only those guys who were with him that night, but a lot of people out in the public who have maybe some small measure of compassion toward O.J. Simpson because he has served 9 years, and many people feeling that it was maybe a little too long. I think he should have played on that compassion and maybe just given people reason to feel that, you know, whether you feel that he is a murderer or not, and there are some people, of course, who do, and then some people who would dispute that, I think that he should have played on those feelings, much like his daughter did. Arnell gave this whole tearful argument from a perspective of family, and that he wants to be back with his family, and that he's been through something. And I think he would have helped himself just even in the court of public opinion, should he have done a little bit more of that.
And we heard that line from the victim of the crime himself, who turned to O.J. and said, "Juice, I'll be there tomorrow."
And O.J. was wiping away tears.
That's right. And you know, Jim had mentioned same old O.J. We also saw it in terms of his personality when he walked in the room. I mean, people talk about O.J. Simpson for the last 50 years as this magnetic personality, and I think I counted it took 6 minutes before he was yucking it up with the chairman of that committee.
Somebody actually used the expression being OJ'd, meaning that, you know, you're sort of like falling under that spell. He definitely still does have that charisma, and I think that he in some ways missed an opportunity to maybe tamp that down, because this wasn't the moment for charisma, but at the very least to maybe play a little bit on the heartstrings of people and to show that remorse and that sorrow and just, the idea that he's learned something from this experience. Ultimately, as Dan Abrams says, he probably will be paroled, but he just didn't help himself going into it and having people feel that he was deserving of it.
Instead, he relied on his eldest daughter, Arnell Simpson. Let's take a look quickly at her statement that she gave, just a few minutes, but as Dan was saying, perhaps more impactful than Mr. Simpson's own testimony. Here you go.
As you know, I'm here on behalf of my family for the purpose of expressing what we believe is the true character of my father. No one really knows how much we have been through this ordeal in the last 9 years. Excuse me. My experience with him is that he's like my best friend and my rock. And as a family, we recognize that he is not the perfect man, but he's clearly a man and a father who has done his best to behave in a way that speaks to his overall nature and character.
And there you heard about his character right there. What were you going to say?
You saw OJ's face drop there. You could see that little bit of emotion. And whatever people think of him, I think that Arnell was very effective there in sort of grabbing your heart, that at the end of the day, there is a family there that has also been affected. His family, his children have been affected by this. And I think that did engender some sympathy.
Jim, in Los Angeles, he outlined what he's been doing in prison. He talked about going to church, talked about volunteering with church programs, working with different sports leagues. Really got a sense of the OJ from the past and the OJ from the present. Two very different people, although the personality is still very much the same.
Well, I would just say that probably every prisoner that I've talked to, the best place to find God is in prison. Most of them do find some kind of religion in prison. It's a way to find hope. Is there a big difference between the OJ we saw today and the OJ we witnessed for the last 25 years? Not in my mind. I saw the same guy who's trying to charm his way through life and has been successful at it. I think one of the things that I think Deborah's absolutely right, Arnell deserved to be heard. Her pain, can you imagine what she's been through, seeing her father go through what he's gone through with the many trials, found innocent, found guilty, and then found guilty again. But I again remind people that there was a family not in that parole hearing, and that was the Goldman family. That was the Brown family. Those families didn't have a say today. And it is odd to me that frequently in these type of settings, a person's record, including their arrest record, not just their conviction record, but their arrest record, is at least mentioned, or the results of the civil case. And in this case, I think that was really missing in this parole hearing, some voice from the Goldman family or from the Brown family.
And of course, O.J. Simpson been behind bars now for the crime of this armed robbery in 2007. The parole board right now deliberating. They say they'll be back in just a few minutes. So keep it right here, because we will come back to you with those results live. We will have the whole team here. Until then, I'm ABC's Brad Milkey. We'll see you in a bit.
warden has to approve everything.
Oh, I can't even talk to him after.
Not happening. I already tried.
Waited this long.
Yeah. My best to the kids.
Put them on the visitor list.
She said they got a couple minutes to go on.
Here's mine. Okay, here it is.
Thank you.
My best to my favorite lady. You know what I'm speaking of. She could be so happy. Tell her I wanted to call her, but I don't call anybody from here. You know, other than my family.
I think I relayed that to her before.
No, this is an elderly former writer for AP. You know, his predecessor. Linda Deutsch.
She said the best, by the way.
I'm talking to no one here. I'm talking to no one. I'm talking to space.
This is an ABC News special report. The O.J. Simpson parole hearing. Now reporting, George Stephanopoulos.
And we are coming back on the air right now because we've gotten the word from the Nevada Board of Parole Commissioners that they will be returning to their hearing room in just about a minute to let us know what is going on in their decision on whether or not to give O.J. Simpson parole. You see him right there. He's there awaiting the decision. He'd been looking a little more relaxed in the last couple of minutes since his testimony. But obviously this has to be a nerve-wracking moment for him. Spent 9 years in prison for that armed robbery in 2007. The 1994 killings of Nicole Simpson and Ron Goldman not at issue here, not something the Board of Commissioners will consider. See O.J. having a little bit of a laugh right there. He was a little more tense in his exchanges with the commissioners. Went on for about 35 minutes. His daughter Arnell Simpson, very moving testimony on his behalf. Let's listen in on O.J. right now.
He's your savior. Who would believe anyone with a mullet like that died here?
Joking.
Where? Yeah, he's the one and only. That's for sure.
His longtime friend and victim of the robbery, Bruce Famar, also giving testimony on O.J.'s behalf during that hearing, which went under an hour. You see the stress on his face now.
And so I just think it's a disgrace.
He was paroled.
This guy was never even assigned to my portion of the prison, ever.
No, he wouldn't be able to spot yourself.
You know, when I would see him is when we would go in the store. We would go in the canteen. I guess he'd come out of that area and he'd stand at the fence and tell us these crazy stories. I mean, it's funny, I give him that. But about how he got kicked out of his son's baseball game and how he was refereeing. And,
seems to be talking about a former fellow prisoner there at Lovelock.
Yeah, but outside of that, I don't know. His telling says I got a shrine in my room, and he walks me up the yard. I mean, the guy is, and he's shameless. Jesus.
Apparently he's talking about a guard there, I've been told.
Well, I like the fact that when it seems like he's running out of material and they have no more interest in him, he has new things that he can
the room
explain about.
Right now, these are the same commissioners, Dan Abrams, who did grant O.J. parole on certain portions of the crime back in 2013.
Right, it's for the same six
gets 2 scoops,
that were evaluating last time in 2013. He was deemed to be a low risk at that point, and as a result was granted parole on a number of the charges, which is the main reason why so many of us believe it's likely that he will be granted parole again now.
And let's hear from Chairman Connie Bisbee.
I mean, seriously, who cuts around the prison, man? You find yourself 6 feet under.
You guys, I may say something publicly after that, but I'm glad I have you on here because Mr. Simpson's always...
Call this parole hearing on Orenthal James Simpson back in... Are we ready to vote, folks?
Chairman Bisbee, I'll start off. Mr. Simpson, you organized this crime in which 2 victims were robbed at gunpoint. It was a serious crime, and there was no excuse for it. You deserve to be sent to prison. You have been in prison now almost 9 years, the minimum amount imposed by the court. You have complied with the rules of the prison. You have programmed in an acceptable manner. You have no prior conviction of criminal activity. You are low risk to reoffend on our guidelines. You have community support and stable release plans. We've heard from you and from your victim. The question here, as with all parole hearings, is whether or not you have served enough time in prison on this case. Considering all of these factors, my vote is to grant your parole effective when eligible.
Thank you.
And I concur with Commissioner Korda and grant parole. And in addition, our decision, although difficult, is fair and just.
I concur with Commissioner Korda and agree to grant parole.
Mr. Simpson, before I cast my vote, I want to let you know that we believe that we're a fair board. We believe that we're a consistent board. I will let you know that consistency also goes to parole, and we do not look kindly upon parole violations. And if I cast my vote to grant and it concludes the hearing, our expectation would be that you not violate even the simplest condition of parole. Having said that, I am prepared to cast a vote. I am prepared to ask the commissioners to set conditions. If that happens, we will produce an order sometime in the next 15 to 20 minutes that will be faxed to you or presented to you at the institution, and it will become a public record. So based on all of that, Mr. Simpson, I do vote to grant parole when eligible, and that will conclude this hearing.
Thank you.
Unanimous by the Nevada Board of Parole Commissioners. An emotional O.J. Simpson will go free on October 1st. Looks like he was signaling to his friend Bruce Vermong there that he'd be getting a call, perhaps his daughter. Dan Abrams, the commissioners there at pains to say that they were following their own regulations, telling the people of the state of Nevada and the United States that they were being fair and just.
Yeah, look, I think this is sort of comparable to an appellate court argument where they've read the briefs ahead of time, they know what the arguments are going to be, and the proceeding itself, the arguments become a bit pro forma. I think they had pretty much made their decision coming into this, that according to their 11 factors here, that O.J. Simpson should be granted parole. And if you look at it through that prism, it's the right decision as a technical, legal parole matter. I think there were many hoping that they would stray a little bit and that they would expand the definition of aggravating factors and potentially consider, for example, the civil judgment, the fact that in the late 80s, O.J. Simpson was accused of domestic violence, et cetera. But none of that came into play. And so in the end, I think that as a technical matter, it ended up being a pretty straightforward, somewhat easy decision for this parole board.
And no mention at all of anything that happened before that armed robbery in Las Vegas back in 2007. Deborah Roberts, clearly he was helped there by the victim, Bruce Vermong. But what I'm thinking about now is that October 1st, O.J. Simpson is going to leave prison after 9 years. Still one of the most famous men in the world.
Still one of the most famous men. But also, one thing that struck me there, George, is he's also much older. He's 70 years old, and that had to have some bearing, too. When he leaned over, you saw the gray hair. He still obviously looks pretty fit, but he's an older man, but also still, as you say, very famous and still very charming. Even some of those guys who were with him that night who don't feel that happy about O.J. Simpson still see him as somebody that they regard somewhat highly.
And perhaps anticipating this day, look at the difference between 2013, that first parole meeting when he had no chance of being released, and today, 2017, a man in much better shape despite his 70 years. Matt Gutman, he spent a lot of time on that the last few years in prison.
One of the things that O.J. has struggled with is diabetes, and you saw him maybe joking about eating all those cookies for the past couple of years. Clearly, he's cut back on whatever sugar he's been eating. He is in far better shape. He has been exercising. You saw him trying to hobble around the hearing room. He is not in excellent shape in terms of the conditions of his knees after so many years of playing football. But clearly he has been trying to exercise, perhaps, George, in anticipation of being granted parole. He certainly seemed very confident in the moments leading up to it. Think about it. The fate of this man was in the hands of that parole board. They could have made a decision to keep him in jail for up to 3 more years. I don't think he thought for a moment that that was going to happen.
That parole board, Matt Gutman, pretty conscious of the fact that O.J. Simpson is going to leave the state of Nevada, head back to Florida.
That's right, and they saw it coming, and he has petitioned for it, and that's something they're going to make. They're going to help him to try to do. He's got to remain in contact with a probation officer, both in Florida and in Nevada. And again, the very clear that he cannot violate any of these parole obligations that he's under, and he could get sent back to prison if he does. And of course, Mr. Simpson said that he will abide by every one of those rulings.
One of the big questions now, Dan Abrams, what does O.J. Simpson do with that fame? What does he do when he returns to the state of Florida? Does he indeed simply spend time with his family or, again, become something of a public celebrity?
Look, I think he can't personally stay away from the limelight. I think that he is going to go out. I think he's not going to just hide underground. And as a result, I think he's going to create controversy in his wake.
And one of the things you did see today, perhaps speaking as much to the public as he was to the parole board, a real determination to still want to make his case and explain himself.
Yeah, and to basically say that the mistake he made was going there. That's it. He shouldn't have gone. But beyond that, he doesn't seem really ready to accept the details of what happened. But let's be honest about this. O.J. Simpson had the book thrown at him. The 9 to 33 years on these particular charges is really a tough sentence in connection with Nevada law. It doesn't mean the judge was out of bounds, but it was a very tough sentence.
And October 1st, he will go free. O.J. Simpson free on October 1st. That's the decision of the Nevada Parole Board. We're going to have much more tonight on World News Tonight with David Muir, and you can get the latest breaking news anytime by downloading the ABC News app. Have a good day.
This has been a special report from ABC News.
And we invite you to stay here with us on ABC Digital. I'm Brad Milkey, and we just saw it there. O.J. Simpson will be granted parole when he's eligible. That day will not happen until early October later this year. By then, he will have served well over 9 years of his sentence, and he was looking at 33 as a potential maximum, and so now he's out well before then. O.J. Simpson broke down or came close to it when he was finally granted that parole. It was unanimous from those 4 commissioners on that parole board. And let's continue with some reaction now that we have that decision. Let's go to ABC senior national correspondent Jim Avila in Los Angeles. And Jim, you saw, a O.J. Simpson who went from laughing, who went from jovial before the parole board was seated there for their final decision, to someone who was very somber and then eventually got choked up as he said thank you.
Well, you can imagine that this was, in fact, a very high-risk morning for him. He was nervous at the beginning when he began to testify before the parole hearing, and he probably got off message because of that nervousness. He began to relitigate the case. No one thought he should do that, but he didn't say anything too terrible that would have diverted the parole board from, as we are trying to see what we're seeing here, diverted the parole board from its decision, which was pretty much made up already before they got here because of their guidelines. So he by the end of it, he was looser. He felt that he appeared to feel as though he had a good chance, and clearly it was unanimous. And he did have, in fact, what is interesting to me, I have to tell you, is that as I'm watching this, it really is deja vu. It was back in 1995 that I was before a camera just like this one when O.J. Simpson was released from the L.A. County Jail. We remember the helicopter shot of him walking out of the jail and me saying on camera that the juice is loose. And once again, here we are years later, 25 years later, and he's almost loose. He's all but loose as of October 1st. He'll be released. So it is interesting that for 25 years this man has captured our attention in the criminal world.
And Jim, you mentioned there that he, that he might have gotten off message, but potentially that the parole board there had their minds sort of made up. Can we just go into a little bit of depth on what they were considering? What was the reason that we think the parole board decided that, 9 years has been enough?
Well, they have a very scientific method about how they release prisoners. They take into consideration a couple of things. Number one, what has been like in prison, and O.J. Simpson had a clean record in prison. He was a model prisoner. He had no disciplinary actions against him. So that was in his favor. Number two is age. At 70 years old, or at 90, as the first commissioner said by mistake, and he laughed at, but at 70 years old, the chances of him committing another serious crime are slimmer. We know that from demographics. That's not just because it's O.J. Simpson, but because of the statistics show that as the older you get, the less of a chance of committing a crime. Also, they gave some credence to the fact that he had not committed a crime before he was 24 years old. So there were those type of factors. In all, he was rated as a low-risk candidate, a 3, which was a low number, as far as mitigating factors that were in his favor. So he did well with that, and that, in fact, was the real reason why he was let go. And it was almost predetermined. I mean, he would have had to stand up and tell the parole board that their mission was not legal, or he would have had to deny everything in his case and say that it was a sham. The parole board does want to hear that you accept your guilt. And while he took a long route to that, eventually he did, and eventually he did say he was sorry. So those were the factors.
And so now we will see O.J. Simpson leave Lovelock, the correctional facility, in October. And outside that correctional facility right now, Matt Gutman, ABC senior national correspondent. And Matt, what's going to happen next for O.J. Simpson? It doesn't sound like he's just going to be dropped off in the middle of the desert there.
No, he won't be leaving. I mean, at some point he will be leaving Lovelock, but it will be to another facility, probably the one about 40 miles outside of Las Vegas. And from there he'll be released. I am sure it will be a cloak and dagger operation. The prison authority here and the corrections authority is going to try to make sure that it's not a media circus and allow him to slip away quietly into the night. But, in the meantime, he's got 10 more weeks or so about here at Lovelock, and I'm sure he'll go back to his routine, probably a little bit more buoyant than he was before. But just to highlight something that Jim was talking about, one of the things that we saw in O.J.'s testimony was a flash of the old hubris, right? A guy who describes himself as possibly the best inmate this prison has ever had, who really deflected a lot of the blame for what happened. And even then, when he did talk about an apology or being sorry for what happened, he said it in the passive tense. Sorry things turned out the way they did. Not really taking full responsibility for it. And I thought one of the things that the entire testimony by Simpson, by Fromong, the man he robbed, by his attorney, was almost a relitigation of this case. And possibly the reason for that is that the audience was not that parole board. As Jim mentioned, O.J. Simpson had a very, very good chance of getting parole. His number was really low, given his age, the victim speaking for him, the fact that he's been a model prisoner. Maybe this was really for our consumption, for the public, to show that O.J., when he goes back out into the public, is not going to be a threat, is not a criminal. That's just one thought I had about that.
All right. Well, thank you, Matt Gutman, there in Lovelock, Nevada, a good 2 hours away from where those parole board members were actually watching O.J. Simpson. Deborah Roberts, you were here watching O.J. Simpson along with the rest of us. What were your impressions when he finally got that decision?
Well, one thing that struck me is a lot of us saw him sitting, looking a little bit jovial during the period where they were waiting for the parole commissioners to come back in. He's talking to various people in the room. You could sense that there was probably tension, but the O.J. of old was surfacing as he was trying to show a little bit of an easy manner there. But what struck me was after they granted the parole, sort of that relief. You could definitely see that in him. He was counting on it. One of his friends told me that he was sort of cautiously optimistic. He hoped he would get this, but he didn't actually feel that it was a done deal. But you could see the relief on his face. But you could also see, as Matt was just saying, that he's an older guy. When he dropped his head, you could see the white hair. Even though he's lost weight and he's in better shape and, the sort of a handsome guy of old, you could see that he is definitely older, and I think that probably weighed in on these decisions as well.
We actually have a clip of that moment. So let's go to the clip right now where O.J. Simpson actually learns that, yes, he will be leaving prison later this fall.
So based on all of that, Mr. Simpson, I do vote to grant parole when eligible, and that will conclude this hearing.
Thank you. Thank you.
And
that might be
Deborah,
the humblest moment.
Yeah, I was going to say, and right here now you see him look over to those people who have actually been with him this whole time, whether it's his daughter, whether it's the victim of the crime who now is on his side and seems to say, I want to give you a hug, but I can't.
And who sort of pleaded his case really for him in a much better way than he did today. Arnell Simpson sort of really tugged at your heartstrings, talking about being a daughter and a family member, longing to see her father. And Bruce Fromong, who basically has forgiven his friend. And I think the idea was, if I've forgiven him, perhaps you should too.
And one other person at O.J.'s side, his lawyer right now. Let's go to him live.
Okay, is that fine? Is that a fair deal? All right, how can I help you?
How important do you think Bruce Fromong's testimony was in the ultimate decision?
I think it was it certainly didn't hurt, and I think it was actually very influential that he came in and he did what he said he was going to do to me when I talked to him on the phone over the course of a couple of weeks, which he was going to testify favorably for Simpson. So I think it was very, very good, and obviously if he had testified negatively, it kind of was going to be contradicted by what he had been telling me. That's kind of why I felt it was important to bring up that conversation with him to say what he's been telling me all along. But right now, Mr. Fromong is there with Mr. Simpson's family. They're all talking right now. He actually would. I asked, Mr. Simpson actually wanted to see Mr. Fromong. Mr. Fromong wanted to see and spend some time with Mr. Simpson. It's not being permitted at this time for various respected reasons for the Nevada Department of Corrections. But they're friends. These are friends, and they were friends. This was a big mishap. So I think it was actually very, very positive. What, in there? I don't think he said anything to me. The mics were right there. You would have caught it, but I don't think he said anything. He was just very happy. He obviously was very emotional. If you were looking at the cameras, he was very emotional. So, next question.
Stephen Week, NBC Network News. Is he worried about how he's going to be received by the public?
Not at all. No. He's been in the media spotlight since he was 19. If he didn't explain it on camera, he certainly explained it, in private. So he's always used to dealing with media attention. That's never been a problem for him.
All right, as you see our camera operator getting settled there. But, Deb, one thing we just heard was Malcolm Laverne there, O.J. Simpson's lawyer, say This was all just one big mishap.
Well, and that's what Fromong, I think, was really helpful towards Simpson in today. He basically sort of painted the picture that this was a mishap. I mean, O.J. Simpson, I think, has argued that over the years, and obviously a jury didn't agree 9 years ago. But I think Fromong's testimony, and you could call it testimony today, because even though it was a statement, it sort of felt like testimony, I think was crucial. Again, probably the parole commissioners already had in mind what they wanted to do, but at least in the court of public opinion, he sort of made it clear to people that this was one big mishap, that it was not really a robbery in the sense of a criminal act that he felt was intended. And I think that for some people, that will be helpful to them in processing this whole thing.
Deborah, now what happens in the court of public opinion for O.J. Simpson? I mean, they said 9 years has been enough in terms of jail time. Has 25 years been enough for the public to forgive O.J. Simpson?
Well, I think that's going to be the big question, because we all know this country was so divided when that first verdict came down, when he was acquitted in the murder trial in Los Angeles. But you've got a good number of people, including some people who have been hurt by O.J. Simpson, who feel that this sentence was too harsh. There are a lot of people who feel that this was retribution for what didn't happen in Los Angeles, even though the judge in this case absolutely disputed that. But I think that you're going to find in the court of public opinion probably a division again, but a lot of people probably will err on the side of saying this guy served a good chunk of time. He served 9 years in prison. And for what he did, considering that he did not carry a gun during this particular crime, I think a lot of people in the court of public opinion will probably feel, even if they don't like O.J. Simpson, he's done his time.
Yeah, I want to take that question to Jim Avila. You've been covering this case and this man for so long, Jim. Are we in a different place now than we were 25 years ago when that white Bronco went down the road?
Well, I think Deborah is right about there being a division in this country, and remains a division in this country among African Americans and whites as far as how they view O.J. Simpson. I know that immediately after the civil trial and even after the criminal trial, that O.J. Simpson was ostracized in his own community, the community where he lived. O.J. Simpson did not live in South Central here in Los Angeles. He did not. Before the trial, before the murders, he was not an African-American civil rights leader, and in fact was almost estranged from that community, which complained that he did not give back. Then after the trial, he was accepted, and he went to African-American churches and sort of had a campaign to re-engage with the African-American community here in Los Angeles. And the reason many people think he did that is because he was so rejected by the white community. The people in Brentwood, where he lived up until that trial, didn't want him there anymore. And they made that very clear. And in fact, he was kicked out of the Riviera Country Club, wasn't allowed to play there anymore. He wasn't, his old golfing friends wouldn't play with him anymore. So there's always been a division there. And amongst the community that O.J. Simpson chose to be with before the trial, he was rejected.
And we're going to go back to Malcolm Laverne right now, O.J. Simpson's lawyer, who's giving his take after this decision has just come
somewhat
down.
Of a laughingstock of a case, too serious when guns are involved.
That it was his right, essentially, to go back there and get his stuff back. One would think that would be over already.
I don't think he said it was his right. I think he said he wanted it, and his stuff was his. So I don't think he said it was right. He didn't feel entitled he felt entitled to the property. He now knows that obviously you can't go, even under Nevada law and most laws of the state of the United States, you can't go and take property even though it's 100% not in dispute that the property belongs to you. Okay? You can't go back and take it by force. If for some reason you stole this from me right now, okay, and then I come and I see you and you have it, all right, I can't go and beat you up and hit you with anything to take it back for myself, okay? I can't do it. And so that's it. So I'm not sure when you said he can't take responsibility. He's taking responsibility. He was just offering an explanation. Next question. All right. Well, thank you very much. I'm going to... Not if I have anything to do with it. The answer is no. The Parole and Probation, the Nevada Department of Parole and Probation, which is known as PMP, they just stated that on the record. That's a question you can refer to them, but the date that they stated is the date they stated.
Did anything inside there surprise you?
I'm trying to think. No, I mean, there was a lot of preparation. You know, normally these hearings, I think to actually do a perfect hearing, a parole revocation hearing like this, you probably could have prepared, a lawyer probably could have prepared for less than an hour for this hearing, all right? You see my file here, how much I have. I don't have books of dreams of things. The whole file is in here, okay? And this one obviously was dealing with the onslaught of the media requests, dealing with various things, and dealing with the Nevada Department of Corrections through their liaisons, and dealing with the Department of Parole and Probation through their liaisons. And I may come out, but my intention right now is to go spend more time with Mr. Simpson and his family. I don't think there was anything that was surprising, because we were able to control a lot of things so well, so much, and especially the hearing. The biggest part of the hearing, obviously, for me, was making sure that certain information was just kept, obviously there's a 10,000-pound elephant in that room, and I think we were very successful in making sure that that elephant was sleeping, and that it was washed and very cleaned, and that it never started, rearing its head or knocking things around. So that was, for me, that's 100% success when that was excluded and kept out. Thank you. No, that was just a letter he had communicated to Assemblyman Fumo, and that was just in the letter. That was the content of the letter. I just read it. That was a letter from him to Assemblyman Fumo, and he's just saying a letter because he had just taken a computer course. And obviously one of the things you learn in computer courses is, if you're doing any modern day computer stuff, is web pages, blogging, all of that stuff. So he said that. So it's not something I would ever advise. What's your name? What's your name and your organization? No, I wasn't referring to that at all. I mean, come on. You know exactly what I was referring to. Come on.
Doubt he would get paroled?
Excuse me?
Did you ever doubt that he would get paroled?
Well, the answer is yes, and no. Yes, because Mr. Simpson is obviously a very polarizing figure. He's very, very well loved. He's, but also he's, held into contempt by a lot of people. And he also wanted to thank the media for, thank the people, his fans who have communicated through the media. You won't publish the positive things that are said about him, but he's, all of his fans have sent him mail saying that they've sent a lot of information to the media. And I've never seen any of it published, maybe one article or something like that. So he wants to thank them. He wants to thank the NDOC, thank the PNP, all of these organizations. So he's just so polarizing. Going back to your question, he's just so polarizing that it was hard to really know the certainty of this. I'll tell you one thing that made me very optimistic, and I'll be very frank with you here. The one thing that made me very optimistic is that and this is something I don't think was published, is that the parole commissioners here that you saw, the 4 individuals, and then there's 2 others that are still active. It's a commission that's 7 total. Those commissioners are actually appointed. They're not elected officials, okay? So they're actually appointed by the governor, and more importantly, and this is what's important, this is why I started feeling very, very good about this, they can only be removed for impeachment, almost like a federal judge. Now, their terms expire, but they can only be removed for impeachment. So they can make decisions regardless of the outcry and the heat on them, okay? That's unlike the process that Mr. Simpson has been exposed to for the last 9 years, where he's dealing with elected judges. And listen, who wants to be the judge who has to run for office that says, I did something favorable to let O.J. Simpson go? I mean, we put on, when I say we, attorneys Tom Pitaro and attorneys Ozzie Fumo and attorneys Trish Palm, all phenomenal lawyers. They actually helped me prepare for this hearing today. They put on probably one of the strongest habeas cases you'll ever find, okay, after the conviction. And it was an uphill battle, and it was respected that it was an uphill battle. But I just, if you sit in those judges' seats and you like your judge position and you know that it's elected, if you do anything negatively if you do anything favorably for Simpson, you got to be thinking, hey, someone's going to I'm going to draw an opponent, and the first thing the opponent's going to say is, this is the judge that let O.J. Simpson go, okay? So that's it. All right, I'm going to go back and spend some more time. Huh? I'm going to go back and spend time with Mr. Simpson and his family a little bit. I'll be back after it's finished. It's kind of hot out here, and hopefully it's hot enough for you to all be gone by then. But if you're not, I'll answer some more questions, all right? Take care.
All right, well, that is Malcolm Laverne, the lawyer for O.J. Simpson, who said right there that he had a victory, and part of that victory, Deborah Roberts, was keeping that 10,000-pound elephant in the room sleeping and clean, as he said.
That was actually very interesting analogy there that he used. But I think that more than anything else, this hearing was not supposed to reflect on the case that was litigated in Los Angeles. Even though a lot of people felt that that might have been looming, it was not supposed to talk about that murder trial that he was acquitted of. And I think as long as they could dodge that, O.J. Simpson didn't help his situation. He skirted near it a few times, talking about his past, and he had never been a violent person, and he was always an easygoing guy, and he never pointed a gun at anybody. You know, he didn't really need to get into all that detail because he just sort of opens up those questions about whether he is a violent person or not. He certainly didn't help himself there. But I was struck by the fact that, as his attorney just said, that these are commissioners who probably didn't have to worry about that public outcry, because there are people who are going to say that they feel that a murderer has been released. And these commissioners said that they are fair. They made that very clear, that they were abiding by what their guidelines are. And if they don't feel that they're being fair, and people don't feel that they're being fair towards Simpson, what do the other inmates have to think about this, and what do they have to look forward to? So I think that I haven't checked Twitter in these last few moments, but it will be interesting to see what people are saying on social media, because I think probably the majority of people will say that, you know, this is something that probably did play out fairly.
Yeah, you get a sense that Malcolm Laverne almost feels free to talk about this a little bit more now that this case is pretty much decided. We know that O.J. Simpson is going to go home eventually. Deborah Roberts, thank you so much for being with us.
Always a pleasure.
And I want to get one last question into Jim Avila in Los Angeles, who's been covering that. And Jim, you heard Deborah say there that the murder was not necessarily part of any consideration here. And now you get the impression from Malcolm Laverne that moving on, the line from O.J. Simpson and his team was that he was just in the wrong place at the wrong time, and he shouldn't be judged too harshly for that either.
Yeah, and it was interesting the word he used, as you mentioned. He called it a mishap that happened in that hotel. The mishap, however, included, you know, if you covered the trial, if you know what happened at the trial, there were tapes. Someone taped it. In fact, one of the people in that room had a recorder going, and you hear O.J. Simpson. He made two mistakes. Number one, he told somebody to bring some heat, so they had a gun. And number two, he said, nobody leave this room. Don't let anybody leave this room. So it became a kidnapping. And those two statements really turned it from a mishap into a crime. Now, was it a crime because he was a first offender and because some of the stuff was his? Was it a serious enough crime that it warranted 9 years in prison? There's valid debate about that, the sentence itself. But it was a crime, and he was found guilty of it, and there's no way that he can get around that, even though obviously there's going to be an effort to do that.
That's Jim Avila in Los Angeles. Thank you so much, Jim. Meanwhile, O.J. Simpson, the star of the trial of the century, was in jail for something else entirely, but now he's getting out. O.J. Simpson will become a free man, or at least on parole, in October. He says he wants to go back to his home and to his family in Florida. He will finally, after 9 years, get that chance. That is all from us here for ABC Digital. I'm Brad Milkey. We'll see you later.